Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is a Grudge Not Held, and in audio form check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 1, The Nail. Kachu. Another absolutely adorable sneeze escaped from young Rangiku, despite her best efforts to hold it in. When the girl had woken up that morning sniffling and sneezing, Jin had ordered her to stay put and rest. Out of contrariness and stubbornness, she had rejected his diagnosis and the bed rest order. In her opinion, the shack that the two children had taken up residence in was good only for sleeping in and providing shelter during snow and rain. On a sunny if a bit chilly day like this, Rangiku wanted to go outside and enjoy the weather. But Jin was quite insistent that she take it easy. I told Ya, her best friend, a title Rangiku was seriously reconsidering at the moment, chided her. You're sick, and Ya need to stay here and rest. I am not sick, the girl stubbornly retorted. She was immediately invalidated by Akachu. Either you're sick, or someone's talking about Ya a lot. You're talking to about me right now. No, I'm talking to Ya, there's a difference. What's the Kachu? Sniff. Difference. Ya need to stay here and rest. Jin ignored her question and repeated his prior instruction. If Ya don't do what I say, I'm gonna have to punish Ya. You aren't my mother, so Kachu. Sniff. So you can't tell me, dang it, Jin. In that one moment she closed her eyes to sneeze. He had slipped out on her. Again. And he neglected to tell her where he was going. Again. Rangiku sighed and lay back down. She immediately noticed how her body welcomed the action, and grudgingly admitted to herself that maybe Jin was right, and maybe she did need some rest. While it would have been nice to go outside and enjoy the late autumn weather before snow came, there really was nothing that she absolutely must do today. That was her final thought as her body system slowed down, and she sank into a catnap. As Jin explored the nearby forest in search of his favorite persimmon tree, while also being sure to keep an eye out for firewood, the boy heard a commotion and slid into a nearby bush for cover. He peeked out between the branches and saw a group of men walking not too far away. Thankfully, they had not noticed him. Rather than take this opportunity to flee, however, Jin instead chose to follow them, and to learn what threat they might represent. He knew who they were, Shinigami. He had seen all types of Shinigami pass through these forests. There were the good ones that slew hollows and were kind to the residents of the Rokanga, but those were few and far between, especially this far out into the districts. The usual Shinigami were decent at best, they did their job and little more, keeping justice but otherwise paying little attention to the poorer classes of Seoul society. And then there were guys like the group Jin saw now. They were men who were nothing more than thugs, and bullied the weaker souls just because they felt like it. The three men he saw now were only a little different in that they did not torment the residents of the Rokanga for mere pleasure. They were on a mission of some sorts, attacking people seemingly at random and stealing parts of their souls. For what reason, Jin did not know or care. What did concern him was that the victims of these particular Shinigami often ended up dead, the very essence of their spirit stolen from them. With these thugs roaming so close to their neck of the woods, Jin was very glad that Rangiku was staying home today. He gave idle thought to seeing if he could find a way to kill one or more of the hunters. Jin doubted that anyone would miss them, and it would mean that less nasty people to worry about in the future. He dismissed the idea after a moment's thought. He didn't want to leave Rangiku alone any longer than he had to, since she was sick right now. However, the idea that Jin could kill one of those Shinigami gave rise to another brainstorm. If he, a random peasant of the Rokanga, could kill them, fully trained Shinigami, then why did Jin and Rangiku have to hide every time those men and others like them showed up? Out here in the Rokanga, it was survival of the fittest. What made him fit enough to survive was his intelligence, and Jin knew that both he and his soul friend had enough spiritual power to require food to survive. Didn't that mean that they had enough power not to be afraid of thugs like the ones roaming the forests of the Rokanga? The only problem was that they lacked the knowledge as to how to make use of that power. And everyone knew that the only place you could learn stuff about spiritual power was the Siriti. Tucking that thought to the side for now, Jin resumed his search for food, and finally located the grove. After he had gathered an armful of persimmons and a decent amount of kindling, he decided to return to the shack. Since the persimmons were fresh off the tree, he would not be able to dry them to his liking, but they were better than nothing. Jin arrived at the shelter, and left the sticks in the small pile he had collected next to the small structure. Then he ducked into the entrance and checked how Ranjika was doing. His smile turned smug when he saw the golden-haired girl gently napping on the floor. Quietly, he put down the persimmons in a pile by one of the walls, and ducked outside once more for another errand. Since Ranjika was sick, she needed fluids to drink in addition to rest and food. The river was not that far away, but it would be rather inconvenient for her to walk there as often as she needed. So Jin decided he would take the liberty of acquiring some bowls or a pitcher or some other water container. After he had procured the needed materials and filled them with water, he returned to the shack. This time, Ranjika was awake, and she greeted him with, "Kachu. I see you're still not sick," Jin noted smugly as he entered the small shelter with a pitcher of water and a couple of bowls in hand. "Where'd you go?" Ranjika sniffed, choosing to ignore his smart aleck remark. "I just went out to get some food and water." "You never tell me where you go." He busied himself with their lunch arrangements, resolutely not looking at her. "Does it matter?" "Yes." "What if something happens to you and Kachu?" "Don't worry, Ranjiku. I can take care of myself," Jin assured her as he poured water into the two bowls, and set one next to her. "By the way, some nasty folk have been wandering a bit close to here, so we'll need to lay low." "You've already made me stay in while I'm sick," she protested. "If you want me to lay any lower, you'll have to get a shovel and bury me underground. If ya keep complaining like that, I just might take ya up on that. But I hate staying in here. It's so boring and dull. Better boring than dead. I hate you." "No, ya don't. Kachu. Ya always know what to say, don't ya, Ranjiku?" "Shut up." Jin only gave her an impish smile in return as he handed her a persimmon to eat. Somewhat mollified by the offering, Ranjika threw him a half-hearted glare before she took a bite out of her meal. A comfortable silence settled between them as the two friends ate their lunch. "Ranjiku, I was thinking earlier," Jin started a conversation after he had finished his first piece. "What? Why do we gotta run and hide every time someone nasty comes along? I betcha we both got more riotsu than most people round here. But we don't know how to use it. So we learn." "How?" "Kachu. Easy, we become Shinigami." Ranjiku paused as she thought over his words, and asked, "Why?" "Why not? They got a good place to live, so at least we don't have to worry about starving. Isn't it dangerous? Wouldn't be fun unless there was a lil risk." She cocked an eyebrow at him. "Didn't you just say that it was better boring than dead? That's different. If we become Shinigami, then we'll be strong, now that the actual chance of us dying will be lower than if we stay where we are." The golden-haired child pondered the thought for a minute longer. "Sure, let's give it a Kachu." Sniff. "Give it a try," she finished. "After you're not sick anymore." "Congratulations, Ichimaru-jin," the headmaster intoned as he handed over a scroll bound in a black string. "You have completed the entire academy course in 1 year, the fastest graduation in history. Because of your accomplishment, you have been given the privilege of choosing which division to join. While your exact rank is up to the captain, a seated officer position is guaranteed. So, which division is most suited to your abilities and interests?" The young prodigy knew his answer immediately. He had researched the captains and their divisions after he realized that he could complete his education in an unprecedented single year. With a record like that, Jin suspected they would have accepted him into the legendary and very exclusive First Division if he had asked for it. He had no interest in doing so, of course, for the simple fact that they were all a bunch of stiffs, in his opinion. The Second Division appealed to him, because sneaking around was something he was good at. There was even the bonus of having a captain with a reputation for being laid back and fun. But in the end, he concluded the second was not for him. If he wanted to spend the rest of his life leaping from the shadows and stabbing people in the back, he would have stayed in the Rokanga. And then there was the fact that he wanted to stay with Ranjiku. While it would be another few years until she graduated, he was determined to be in a division they would both like. One full of assassins was not the place for his best friend, so the second was discounted from his options. Aside from making sure Ranjiku would be nearby, the primary factor in Jin's decision was the personality of the captain. For starters, he wanted the person to be fun. He had no desire to suffer under a dry stickler for rules who wouldn't know a good joke if it danced in front of them and recited the history of Seoul society. That's why the 1st, 6th, and 9th divisions were off his list. The second factor in his choice that was equally important as the first was education. Jin wanted to actually learn how to fight, and more importantly, how to win. Life in the Rokanga had taught him that there was no honor in battle. It was a fight for survival, and nothing else mattered other than getting out alive. The 11th would be a good place to make sure one got training on how to be strong, but Jin did not like to rely on brute strength. He knew that even if he became a captain one day, there would always be someone stronger. So the solution was to find a division where he could learn how to use strength, speed, and intelligence to win. Again, the 2nd division came to mind, but there were other options, such as the 5th or 13th. He gave some thought to the 12th division, but elected not to on the grounds that their captain was too new. While it would be interesting to witness firsthand how this new captain would handle his position, Jin thought it a better idea to settle on a captain with a more solidified reputation. The 7th was like the 11th in that it emphasized strength, but it was also more balanced, and the captain had a decent reputation. However, the place that appealed to him the most was the 8th division, under Kiraku Teiko. So, you wish me to teach you the art of war? Jin nodded at Kiraku's solemn request for confirmation. Why? The captain asked. We're Shinigami, ain't we? The young 5th seat replied. So we should do the best we can to get stronger and better. The colorfully clad captain stroked his stubble. True, but not many come to me to ask for lessons. After all, I'm not the best fighter in the Godai 13. Quite true, Lisa agreed bluntly. It goes without saying that both Yamamoto Soteiko and Anohana Teiko could wipe the floor with you. What about the other captains? Jin asked knowingly. None of them would win a fight against Kiraku Teiko, the lieutenant answered with the exact same inflection as before. Oh, Lisa-chan, Kiraku chuckled. Do you really think that poorly of your superiors? I am simply stating the facts, Lisa said. The real reason you're reluctant to give Jin lessons is because you'd rather chase women, drink sake, or sleep. Now, wait a minute, the captain protested. You will receive your first lessons from Kiraku Teiko tomorrow an hour after lunch, Lisa informed the younger Shinigami. Shouldn't I say yes to Jin's request first? He is a prodigy who graduated from the academy in a single year, and he is asking you for lessons, the lieutenant said. You do not want him to squander his talents. I suppose not, Kiraku admitted with a wry smile. He heaved a despondent sigh and clambered upright. Between the two of you, if I'm not careful, you might actually turn me into a respectable captain. I shudder at the thought, Jin smiled. Jin found her in the mess hall of the 8th division. He knew it was her first day here, and that the reserved young girl would probably be eating by herself. The 4th seat had not seen as much of Rangiku as he had wanted during the past 5 years, between his duties in the 8th and her studies at the academy. They still met regularly, although weekly get-togethers became bi-weekly, and then monthly, and so on. He had at least managed to witness the graduation ceremony, but had not been able to talk with her face-to-face until now. But as he schemed the room for a certain strawberry blonde head, he could not seem to find her. That puzzled him. He knew this was the right place to look for her, and it was lunch hour, but he could not pick out Rangiku among the people who seemed to be sitting alone. Please let me fetch your food, milady. Don't. He's a greedy pig who'd eat it before it got here. I'll get it for you. You liar. Jin took note of a crowd of young men at one table, and decided to meander over to investigate the commotion. I have here an excellent batch of sake. Please have some. I've tasted that swill of yours. Here, this brand is much better. Calm down, boys, a feminine voice sang, so familiar it also made Jin's eyebrows shoot up in surprise. I'm very grateful for all of your help. No doubt about it. And she had seemingly found new ways to have fun. A brief feeling he would eventually identify as jealousy churned his insides. Then he dialed his smile to its mischievous setting and then cleared his throat very audibly. The men gave a glance over their shoulder at the noise, and then turned back to the object of their adoration. A second later, belatedly realizing who it was behind them, they all simultaneously stood at attention and faced their superior officer. "Good morning, 4th Seat Ichimaru," they all chorused. The only person who did not get up was the one the men had all been fawning over. She was sitting at the table, and was now looking curiously at what had ripped her fan club away from her. Upon recognizing the person, Ranjiku's face lit up with a sunny smile. "Jin," she cried happily, and instantly jumped up to hug him. The silver-haired teen was not normally the touchy-feely type, but he could make an exception for Ranjiku. As he returned his childhood friend's embrace, Jin could see the crestfallen looks on the other men at the sight before them. "Good to see ya, too," he said as gently released her from his arms. "Mind if I join ya for breakfast?" "Of course not," Ranjiku replied brightly. "You too," Jin pointed at the pair of food-bearers he had first heard. "Get us some breakfast." "Yes, sir," they acknowledged despondently. "And you too," he gestured to the two drink volunteers. "Get us some water." "Yes, sir," they answered in the exact same tone as the other two men. The highly ranked officer then flopped down in a seat and turned his back on them. "The rest enjoy your breakfast." "Thank you, sir," the other men bowed sadly and dispersed. "Water?" Ranjiku grimaced. "What about the sake?" Later, Jin said. "This is your first day at the 8th, it wouldn't be a good idea for ya to show up drunk." "But the captain does." "This ain't his first day, though," he countered. "Once you've been captain for a few centuries, I'll let ya drink sake in the morning." "Humph," Ranjiku pouted. Their conscripted waiters brought them breakfast, and Jin dismissed them with an offhand wave. "So, how ya liking the 8th so far?" he asked after his first bite. "Great," she chirped happily. "You're welcome," Jin smiled at her. "Huh," she looked at him questioningly. "Who do ya think made sure ya got assigned here?" Ranjiku blinked and regarded him with a blank expression on her face. "Well, I am the 4th seat o' this division," Jin pointed out. "And the captain's pretty easygoin', so with his help, I was able to pull a few strings to get ya here." She looked at him for a moment more before she finally smiled and said, "Thank you, Jin." "She needs someone to comfort her," Ranjiku argued as they both walked down the corridors of the 8th Division. "And Captain can't do it right now because with Lisa gone, he's actually doing the paperwork." "Well, I ain't stoppin' ya," Jin replied. "But right now you're the second highest officer in the 8th, she continued, so it's part of your duty to check up on her." "You're better at comfortin' people than I am," he protested. "Which is why I'm coming with you," Ranjiku said. "Listen, Jin, at the rate you're climbing the ranks, I wouldn't be surprised if you end up captain someday." "Ah, thanks, Ranjiku." "Shut up and let me finish. As I was saying, if you end up captain, you need to learn how to relate to people in ways other than playing pranks on them." Jin sighed as they arrived at the door where the youngest member of their division resided. He knew that Ranjiku was deliberately leading them here, but he had decided to let her. He felt that this was one of those times where she was not going to give up. His determined friend knocked on the door and called out, "Naneo-chan, are you in?" There was a pause before a girl's voice timidly asked, "Who's there?" "It's Ranjiku and Jin," she answered. "Can we come in?" Another short pause before the resident answered, "Okay." Ranjiku slid the door open and entered the room, Jin close behind her. The latter shut the frame behind him, and they looked at the room's small inhabitant. She was sitting on her futon, hugging a large book to her chest. "How are you feeling?" the elder girl asked gently as she sat down next to her much smaller teammate. Jin leaned back against the wall as he crossed his arms, and watched the show with a puzzled feeling. "I'm fine," Naneo answered. "Are you sure?" Ranjiku pressed softly for confirmation. "You know that if you want to talk, Jin and I are here to help." The bookish girl looked at her visitors cautiously, before she said softly, "I just miss Lisa." "We all do," Ranjiku replied. "She was special to you, wasn't she?" "She was like a big sister," Naneo confirmed. "Every month she would come and read to me. The night she left was when we were supposed to read." "Oh," the blonde girl said sympathetically. Then Rangiku noticed out of the corner of her eye that Jin had not changed his facial expression since they entered the room. Because of how long she had known him, she could tell that his smile was sadder than normal, but Nanao did not have that same benefit. "Jin," she hissed at him. "What? Show some sensitivity and stop smiling." "It's all right," Nanao rushed to say. "It's not all right," Rangiku disagreed as she glared at her friend. "It really is," the younger girl insisted. "It's worse when he doesn't smile." Jin and Rangiku both looked at Nanao in interest and surprise, respectively. "Why do ya say that?" the boy asked in a tone that indicated he was honestly curious at the answer. "When you're smiling, it's like everything's normal for you, like you can take care of it," the girl explained. "When you've stopped smiling, it means something really bad has happened." "Like what happened to Lisa?" Rangiku said. "Yeah," Nanao nodded. "People shouldn't be smiling because of what happened to all those people, not just Lisa, but if it's Ichimaru-san, I'm okay with it. As long as he's smiling, I know everything's going to be alright." Since her head was bowed as she said this, Nanao did not see Jin and Rangiku sharing surprised looks. Before either of them could respond, there was a knock on the door. "Come in, Kiraku Teiko," Jin said. "You know it's kind of creepy how you can always tell I'm coming," the captain chuckled lightly as he entered the room, and then turned to the girls. "Hey there, Rangiku-chan, Nanao-chan." "Hey," Rangiku gave back a brief smile of greeting. Nanao had jumped to attention when she saw who had entered the room. "I'm honored by your presence, Kiraku Teiko." "How come ya didn't stand at attention for me?" Jin asked. Their young hostess paled when she realized that she had forgotten to show respect for her third seat, and stuttered, I am sorry, Ichimaru-san." "I dash." "Calm down," the trickster smiled in amusement. "I was just teasing ya." The little girl seemed to relax slightly at the fox's words, but she still seemed uneasy. "You don't need to be so formal," Kiraku chuckled, and then turned a little more serious. "How are you holding up?" "Fine," Nanao answered as she cautiously sat back down. "Ichimaru-san and Matsumoto-san were visiting." "That's nice of them," the older man smiled. "Do you mind if I borrow Jin for a moment? There's something I want to talk to him about." "If Kiraku Teiko needs him, you don't need to ask me," Nanao rushed to say. "It's polite to ask," the captain replied, and nodded to Jin to follow him. After the two men had left, Rangiku turned to her female companion with a knowing smirk that sent tremors down Nanao's spine. "You," the grinning girl announced mischievously, "have a crush on Jin." "What?" Nanao exclaimed with a red face. "No, I don't." "Oh, Ichimaru-san," Rangiku sang in a falsetto. "I know everything's going to be alright as long as you're smiling." Nanao's glasses appeared to have fogged up, and she hastily pulled them off. "That's not what I meant. I mean, that's not what I said. Just admit it, kid, you like him." "No, I don't, I swear." Stubbornly Nanao began polishing the lenses with her trailing black sleeve. "Admit it." "I don't, please believe me." "Admit it." "I promise he's all yours." Wait, what?" Rangiku suddenly had a feeling that the conversation had turned the tables on her, and she did not like it. It was made all the worse by the fact that she had both initiated and pursued the topic. "He's yours," Nanao repeated innocently, and then she finally looked up from cleaning her glasses with slight confusion. She continued, "Isn't that why you were asking?" "Of course not." Rangiku protested, and she was not blushing. "Then why are you always with him?" the girl questioned. "He's my best friend. That's all." Nanao placed her glasses back on her face, and then put a finger to her chin thoughtfully. "I think you're in denial," she finally decided. "Denial?" Rangiku shrilled in a whisper. She was trying to restrain herself from waking the neighbors, but it was hard when Nanao was spouting pure nonsense. "A refusal to grant the truth of a statement," the bookworm defined helpfully. "I know what it means. And I'm not in denial. Don't worry, I'm sure Ichimaru-san likes you back. But if you want, I could ask him how he feels about you." "Don't you dare pause. That's an order." "Jin, are you sure this is a good idea?" "Hey," Kiraku Teiko said he was counting on me to make sure he got work done. I don't think this was what he had in mind. All the more reason. Now, on 3. A sigh of resignation was followed by, fine. 1. 2. 3. 2 buckets filled with icy water were splashed onto the dozing pink-clad captain, and that was the cue for Jin and Rangiku to take off running towards the 8th Division's main office. You'd think a lieutenant on his first day would be nicer to the man who gave him that rank. Rangiku hollered as they sped through the corridors. He didn't give me this badge to be nice. Good thing. The pair ran into the captain's office, and then stopped dead in their tracks. Standing in front of them and dripping cold water onto the floor was Kiraku. He had his arms crossed over his chest, and he was looking down at them with an amused smile and a raised eyebrow. And here I was thinking you would come up with something more original than a bucket of water, the captain chided. It was quick and easy, and did the job right, Jin justified. If ya want creative, I'll do that next time, K. I do, Kiraku nodded. If I'm interrupted from my beauty rest and forced to do paperwork, then I'd prefer it be done in an inventive manner. I'll keep that in mind, the new lieutenant saluted playfully. Bye-bye, Yamaji, Jin called as he and his captain left the office. The old general merely grunted at the impetuous young man, far less of a reaction than the trickster had been hoping for. After they were in the hallway, Jin turned to his captain and asked, why wasn't he upset when I called him Yamaji? Because he long ago stopped caring how people refer to him as long as they obey his orders, Kiraku smiled. Most people think that since he's the leader of the Shinigami, he would prefer to be called by his rank. That's probably true, so I wouldn't advise spreading that bit of information around. It'd be better if his soldiers call him more familiar names of their own initiative. Naneo walked through the halls of the 8th Division, her destination firmly in her mind. While she was the youngest member of the division, complete with the apparent age of an adolescent, she sought to validate her position by performing her duties to the best of her abilities. And right now, those duties meant she needed to deliver a message to her lieutenant. She stopped in front of the door to the vice captain's office and went to her knees in the proper position for showing respect for the second seat. Naneo knocked once and placed her fists on the ground, keeping her eyes down. Ichimaru Fukutaiko, she announced. I have a message for you. When silence was her only reply, she repeated her statement. Once again, air empty of words greeted her. Was he not present? No, a quick look with her spiritual senses told her that the lieutenant was definitely inside, as was the 5th seat. She risked sliding the door open. Naneo knew it was not the most proper course of action, but she had learned that in the 8th Division, people followed the example of their captain and were fairly laid back concerning the more formal aspects of regulations. She saw no reason to act differently, and considering she was on good terms with both the people she detected inside, she took the bold action of opening the lieutenant's door. Naneo almost fainted from shock at the sight that greeted her. 5th seat Matsumoto was lying on her back on Lieutenant Ichimaru's desk, and on top of her, giving her a very passionate kiss, was the owner of the aforementioned desk himself. While she had known that the two had, finally, become an official couple recently, it was one thing to be informed of something, and quite another to see its vivid proof. The romantically inexperienced brunette could only stare in stunned fascination as the couple, oblivious to everything except each other, continued to lock lips. Naneo's brain restarted when she noticed that their hands were starting to wander to inappropriate places. Rather than interrupt her superior's private moment, she shut the door as quietly as she could. Even though they should not be kissing while on duty, Naneo was too embarrassed to announce her presence. It wasn't fair how they were the ones caught kissing on duty, and she was the embarrassed one. Red-faced and flustered, she decided that the message was not that important, and could wait to be delivered until later. She also declaratively decided that there was a reason rules and regulations were in place, and she intended to follow them to the letter from then on. It would lead to less mental scarring for her in the future. Of all the places to go on vacation, and you suggest here? Why not? Rangiku threw up her hands in exasperation, encompassing the locale in the same gesture. We're in the wilder regions of the Rukanga. This isn't usually what a girl imagines for a romantic evening. Jin simply smiled and sauntered past her. Well, yeah, I could have said no. I'm still trying to remember how you convinced me in the first place. I think it's good for us. He paused beside a tall tree and patted its trunk, bending in as if to examine the bark. It'll show us how far we've come. With a defeated sigh, she followed. Jin and Rangiku hiked through the 64th district of the Rukanga, and kept an eye out for familiar landmarks they had not seen in over 50 years. And to celebrate our accomplishments, we make love in our old shack. Well, if ya insist. Rangiku snorted, and then her expression turned pensive. It's weird, thinking about how much has passed since we were last out here, she admitted. We've become Shinigami, you're a lieutenant and just got Bankai, so you'll make captain soon. I'm a third seat. Who will be my lieutenant when I'm captain? Jin interjected. And then, there's us, she finished, self-consciously twirling her shoulder-length hair. Rangiku inhaled through her nose, and exhaled through her mouth to calm her jittery nerves. It's all so new, so big, I can't believe we're married. I mean, how many Shinigami actually do marry, aside from the nobles? She asked. We're the first I've heard of, Jin said, then putting his hand on her shoulder, he pointed off to the right. There it is. Sure enough, the old shack where the newly married couple had once spent their childhood still stood, miraculously intact. It was smaller than Rangiku remembered, and years of neglect left it in even worse shape than it was in when she and Jin lived in it. It was a wonder as to how it remained standing. As they contemplated how both the people and the scenery had changed over the past few decades, Jin moved his hand down from her shoulder to twine with hers. A light smile appeared on Rangiku's face, and she curled her fingers around her husband's hand. All right, she sighed. Let's go make love in our old shack. If ya insist. The new, light weight of the Haori was resting quite comfortably on Jin's shoulders as the doors to the captain's meeting room opened before the newly promoted Silver Shinigami. Ichimaru Teiko, the old general on the other side of the room, said as Jin entered the room. Take your place with your fellow captains. The new captain of the 3rd Division sauntered to the end of the row, and stood next to Aizen, who gave him a friendly smile as he passed. The captain commander tapped his cane once to announce the commencement of the meeting. First order of business, the welcoming ceremony for our newest member, he began. As you know, the captain's position for the 3rd Division has been vacant for some time. Yesterday, I in addition to 3 other captains held the captain qualification exam to determine if he was worthy of this position. We deemed his personality and abilities acceptable. As such, the lieutenant of the 8th Division, Ichimaru Jin, is now the commanding officer of the 3rd Division. The ceremony continued as planned, and its conclusion, Jin formally announced his choice of lieutenant. The recipient surprised no one. Ichimaru Rangiku came forward, hardly able to suppress her smile, and accepted the arm badge from First Lieutenant Sasaki Kojiro. The vibrant brightness of her expression prompted the elder man to smile in return, and he murmured a quiet but warm congratulations to her as she set the insignia of her rank in place. After the meeting had concluded, Yamamoto called, Ichimaru Teiko and Ichimaru Fukutaiko, you will stay. Mildly confused, the two obeyed, and after the last of the other captains and lieutenants left, the captain commander began. I do not need to remind you that your new positions will require more responsibility from you. The recently promoted pair did not speak, as they knew their commander still had more to say. And I have no issues with the captain being married to his lieutenant, the general continued. However. Knew there was a however comin', Jin muttered to his wife. While Rangiku wanted to warn him to keep quiet, it still made her smile. Yamamoto glared from his nearly closed eyes, and the other captain looked back innocently through his similarly nigh shut lids. However, the captain commander growled as soon as he was sure the fox would not interject again, I fully expect that you do not let each other become a distraction from your duties. Of course not, Rangiku assured him. Therefore, I fully expect to receive paperwork from the 3rd Division, on time, and completed. Both Ichimaru grimaced at the prospect of the increased workload their new rank would incur. Am I clear? Yamamoto demanded. Yes, sir. Sure thing, Yamaji. Good. You are dismissed. Rangiku stood to the left of her husband as they faced the seated officers of the 3rd Division. She knew that with the absence of both a captain and a lieutenant had severely hampered the 3rd's performance, and she could tell by the hopeful looks on their subordinates' faces that they were quite glad to see them. However, more than a few were sporting more cautious looks, doubtless because of who the pick for their captain was. Jin's reputation preceded him, after all. Which one? Oh yeah, is third seat Kira Izuru? Jin began. I am, sir. A blond man in the front row stepped forward in response. Get up here and stand next to me, the captain ordered. With a face full of mild confusion, Kira moved to Jin's right side. While Rangiku is my lieutenant, the captain explained, you're the guy who's been with these people all these years, so you're the guy who's gonna tell me all the secrets of the 3rd Division. Rangiku smiled at her husband's shrewd maneuver. Captains were the sole and absolute authority in their divisions, and they chose one person as their personal assistant, or as they were known by their official title, lieutenant. Since the top 2 ranks were so tightly knit together, the gap between them in terms of authority was far narrower than the gap between lieutenant and 3rd seat. By declaring Kira as a person who would stand by his side, as a figure with only marginally less authority than a lieutenant, Jin had demonstrated to his new division that he intended to lead them sincerely and with the best of his abilities. Her husband may still be somewhat lacking when it came to empathy, but he definitely knew how to lead. So who's this? Rukia was brought out of her musings by the man she had just been studying. She saw that he was now openly looking at her, and she felt as if she were a rabbit sighted by a fox. Rukia could not truly put her finger on it, but there was something off about this silver-haired captain. This is my sister, Kukaki Rukia, her adoptive brother introduced formally. Rukia, this is Ichimaru Jin, the captain of the 3rd Division. She bowed to the waist in respect of the other superior officer. It is an honor to meet you, she said, and hoped that her manners were acceptable to her noble lord brother. She had yet to learn all the intricacies of social etiquette, but so far it seemed like she had managed to live up to whatever standards he held her to. Pleased to meet ya, the fox grinned. I see being stiff is a family trait, though. I apologize if I offended you, Ichimaru Teiko, Rukia said quickly. Don't worry about it, Ichimaru chuckled lightly. I was just teasing ya. Both ya and your brother got the same humorless genes after all. She is not a blood relative, Byakuya corrected. We recently adopted her into the Kukaki clan. Oh? Ya wouldn't be able to tell by lookin' at her, standin' and speakin' all proper like, the Serpentine captain said. So, Rukia-chan, where do ya come from? The Rokanga, sir, she answered, and hoped that she did not offend Byakuya by mentioning her lowly origins. No kiddin'. Ichimaru said enthusiastically. Same here. Nice to run into a fellow survivor. How was she to respond to that? Fortunately, Ichimaru continued on without waiting for her to reply. So yeah, see, I'm livin' proof that anyone can make it here in the Godai 13. I came from the 64th district, and look at me now, captain of a respected division, and married to a beautiful woman. Rukia mentally gave her condolences to that unfortunate female. And already, you're doin' well for yourself, gettin' adopted into a great noble house. Who knows, maybe one day ya could have a division of your own, Ichimaru continued. I very much doubt that, Ichimaru Teiko, Rukia said. Unmodest, too. Kukaki Teiko, ya sure know how to pick 'em. Do you have any serious business with us, Ichimaru Teiko? Byakuya asked coldly. Jin put a finger to his chin as if giving the matter serious consideration, then answered, nope. Then, if you will excuse us, we will take our leave now. Rukia followed in her brother's wake after they gave their bows and departed. She could not bring herself to look back at that man, nor could she shake the horrible suspicion that if she did, it would be to find he was still watching her with those seemingly closed eyes and unnerving smile. It was well that she did not. Because he was. Who's this, Rangiku? Shihei went stiff at the sound of the unfortunately familiar voice of Captain Ichimaru. Ah, Jin. This is Hisagi Shihei. He's the new lieutenant for the 9th Division. Rangiku introduced cheerfully. Hisagi-san, have you met Jin yet? We have not been formally introduced before, but it's an honor to do so now. Shihei bowed to the superior officer, doing his best to keep the nervousness out of his voice. He had not been attempting anything inappropriate with Rangiku, but it was common knowledge that Captain Ichimaru was not the most mentally stable person in existence. Who knew what the man would consider inappropriate regarding his wife? Or was he overthinking this? After all, he was hardly the only person who had eyes for beautiful women, but Shahei would never consider propositioning her, considering her status as married. There were nasty rumors about what happened to those who had, though. Rangiku, mind heading on. Hisagi and I need to have some man talk. Okay, but please don't break his mind. Shahei's head snapped around to regard her in disbelief, even as the captain responded, I'll do my best. Rangiku pecked her husband on the lips and walked on, thus leaving Shahei alone with Ichimaru Jin. I know that ya think my wife is beautiful, the silver-haired captain began, and the scarred lieutenant gulped. And I know that ya think that I'm here to threaten ya and make sure ya don't do anything naughty with her. Shahei tried to stammer out his denial that he would do anything inappropriate to such a respected and off-limits beauty, but being stared down by this menacing figure was making it difficult to talk. But don't worry, I've never killed a guy for looking at her wrong, Ichimaru told Shahei, and it certainly sounded to the younger man like he was trying to be reassuring. Then the captain leaned in close, that smile growing ever wider, and said, I Jews help Rangiku bury the bodies. Shahei's jaw dropped. The captain took that as his cue to exit stage left, and clapped him on the shoulder as he passed. The shivering lieutenant wondered if he would ever find out if Ichimaru was joking or not. For the crime of bestowing Shinigami powers to a living human, Kukaki Rukia has been sentenced to execution via the Sokyoku 25 days hence. This is the final decision by the Central 46. In their office in the 3rd Division, Jin and Rangiku looked at each other after hearing the message from the Hell Butterfly. Poor Rukia-chan, the former vagabond shook his head in dismay, and his smile was tainted by sadness. It was surprising to hear that the Central 46 had ordered her execution, Rangiku agreed as she paused in filling out a form. I wonder why they thought she deserved the death penalty. 'Cause they're jerks. Well, that's a given, but I'm surprised they would have the guts to kill off someone from the Kukaki clan without a second thought. Kukaki Teiko didn't look like he cared much, Jin told her. Though he never looks like he cares, 'bout anything. You ran into him. Kenpeki and I did, right after he told Rukia-chan they were gonna execute her. Rangiku stopped working and snapped her head at her husband. You left Zaraki and Kukaki in the same room together. Don't be silly, Jin corrected her without looking up from his paperwork. We were standing on a walkway. Oh, of course. And that will make sure those two would behave, she said sarcastically. Don't worry, I pulled Kenpeki away when things got a little heated, Jin assured her. You pulled Zaraki Kenpeki away from a fight? Yep. I thought only Anohana or Yamamoto could do that. Or Yachiro, if she wanted candy badly enough. It wasn't that hard. I just tied him up. There was silence in their shared office for a time. Then, you tied him up. He wasn't happy about it. Rangiku stared at her husband for a few moments longer, looking for any sign that he was pulling her chain. After not detecting anything, she said, Jin, every time I'm starting to think you've finished doing the impossible, you do something to top it. Anything, to keep life exciting, for my Rangiku. She smiled, but they both sobered when they remembered the original topic. I'm gonna miss Rukia-chan, Jin said mournfully with that same sad smile. I wish there was something we could do to at least make sure she lived, Rangiku agreed. But if the Central 46 ordered an execution for a noble from one of the 4 great houses, they're definitely not going to lessen her sentence because of anything we might say. We could kill M, he suggested. Don't even joke about that. Jin turned his head to her, and his eyes came open fully. Yeah, think I'm kidding. Yes. Her reply was less an answer to his question, and more an order for him to behave. Chapter 2, Invasion. Ichigo's expression of amazement at the Herculean strength of the West Gate Guardian turned into puzzlement as the enormous man suddenly froze. What's wrong, Jidanbo? He asked as he walked up to the giant's side. A closer look revealed that the gatekeeper was trembling in terror, his eyes wide and focused in front of him. Ichigo turned to look to spot a single man walking calmly towards them. Just like the other Shinigami the substitute had met, granted he could count that number on one hand, he was wearing a black shiakusho and hakama. But a notable difference to his uniform was the addition of a white haori. The orange-haired teenager scoffed, unimpressed. Who's that guy? Tidasan can name, captain of the 9th Division, Jidanbo stuttered through his fear. What is going on here? The newly arrived man inquired, taking in the scene before him. Jidanbo bowed his head and explained, I lost, a defeated gatekeeper must open the gate for the victor. That is incorrect, the captain rebuked him as he walked towards the trembling giant. Your duty as a gatekeeper is to prevent invaders from entering the Siriti, even if it means your life. But, they spared my life when I lost, Jidanbo protested. Then your crime is not only treason, but cowardice, Tisan pronounced without forgiveness, and then turned to the would-be invaders. I will give you this one warning, retreat and I will let you go. I have no wish to spill blood, but if you force my hand, then I will demonstrate to you the consequences of your actions. Nice offer, Ichigo grinned ferociously. But I got this rule against running away from guys who threaten to kill unarmed men. Here's a better deal, run away now, and I won't kick your sorry butt all the way home. Ichigo. Yuriyuki barked at him. Back off. We need to retreat. What? He replied incredulously as he turned to look at the sentient feline. I can't just run away, just give me a second to beat him and... Are you Kurosaki Ichigo? The orange-haired substitute Shinigami stopped mid-sentence and turned his attention back to his opponent. Yeah, how do you know? Then that is all the more reason why I cannot let you enter, Tisan replied, and brought his Zanpakuto up once more, this time with the blade raised vertically in front of his face. Cry, Suzumushi. Ichigo froze for a moment as the noiseless scream hit his ears. He was still for a few more seconds before he fell to his knees and screamed as he held his ears at the pain. Jidanbo was not so fortunate, he had been knocked completely unconscious by the attack of the captain's Shikai. The giant toppled, and the massive gate began to descend upon both men. Show. A simple but strong blast of Kido from the captain sent both of the helpless warriors into the air to land on the ground, one dead to the world and one who felt like someone had used his head as the clapper for a particularly loud bell. Cries of alarm came from the other humans, and Uriah turned around just in time to see Tisan depart without so much as a goodbye before the gate closed completely. Are you alright, Kurosaki-kun? Orium asked worriedly as she and the other two humans ran forward to check on their friend. They'll be fine, Yuriyuki assured her. Jidanbo is just unconscious, but he'll have a headache when he wakes up like the one Ichigo is suffering right now. What was that? The mentioned human groaned as he shook his head in the attempt to clear his ears from the insistent ringing. A sound-based attack, the cat answered. You were able to resist its affects more because of your higher Ryutsu. Jidanbo, on the other hand, didn't stand a chance. Is he? Ichigo asked in concern. He'll be fine, Yuriyuki repeated patiently with the knowledge that the substitute probably had not heard the first reassurance due to the after-effects of the sonic attack. What about the gate? Ichigo looked at their port of entrance, only to see it had reunited with its old friend the ground. He cursed at their ill fortune. Don't worry about it, the cat informed him. With Tisan as your opponent, there was no other outcome. Just be glad that he was feeling merciful and only gave you a headache. Hey, sorry I'm late, Jin apologized without true regret in his voice as he entered the captain's meeting room and counted 11 other Haori-clad people inside. While the more rule-abiding captains were giving him mildly annoyed looks, Jin did not become concerned about his tardiness in earnest until he noticed that Kenpei was already there. The unofficial rule among the captains was that if you arrived after Kenpei, you were inexcusably and tragically late. He noticed that there was still someone absent, and that person was usually reliable about attendance. Where's Yukatake Teiko? Something happened. He's on sick leave, Tisan answered from his position between the two lines of captains. Even if one allowed for the fact that captains were expected to keep a level of self-control, he seemed awfully calm about being called on for his actions at the West Gate. Again. Jin's smile dropped in genuine concern. I hope he gets well. Shut it, Kenpei barked impatiently. I want to ask this guy why he went off to play with some Ryoka. Okay, the silver-haired man chuckled easily, his smile returning to its normal position as he took in line his spot next to Aizen. Ask away. Like I just said, the berserker captain continued, focusing his attention on Tisan, why'd you go off and fight M? Actually, the better question is why you didn't finish M off. Justice is the path of least bloodshed, Tissen replied simply. I gave the Ryoka the option to retreat and cease their attack. Blood did not need to be spilt. While Jin knew that Tissen had a fixation on justice and the path of least bloodshed, capitalization required, there was something off about his story. The reasons he gave were logical and consistent with his personality, but Jin had a feeling that there was another reason for the sparing of the Ryoka. Don't tell me you're getting squeamish, Kenpei taunted. Just because I choose not to draw blood when there is no reason does not mean I will hesitate to kill when I have to, the blind captain retorted. Not all of us are mindless brutes. A stern tap on the floor by the captain commander's cane prevented a snarly rebuttal from the 11th Division captain. Tissen Taiko, you should know better than to deal lightly with intruders, no matter their power level, Yamamoto rebuked. I understand, Captain Commander, Tissen submitted with a nod of his head. Jin had to give points to the guy for not making any excuses on his actions. Before anything else could be said, the alarm rang and alerted the captains that, once again, uninvited and unwanted guests were inbound. Intruders. Aizen said with a level of surprise. Sounds like your Ryoka decided to come back, Jin commented to the man on trial, his ever-present smile now attaining a mocking tone. An unwise decision, Tissen noted. Now are ya sorry for letting em go? I am not. I warned them, and they failed to heed my words, their blood is now on their own hands. It was not a surprise to anyone when Kenpei was the first to dash out of the meeting room, no doubt seeking to be the first one to fight the Ryoka. TCH. It was unavoidable, was Yamamoto's only comment on the truculent man's departure, and then addressed the rest of the captains. This meeting is temporarily on hold, we will continue this discussion later, as well as Tissen Taiko's punishment. Now, get to your divisions. A chorus of affirmatives answered their general and the group of elites dispersed to exit the room. However, Jin wanted to have one little chat with Tissen before they ran off to their respective divisions. These Ryoka sure got convenient Timon, he noted as he stepped next to his blind peer. What do you mean? Tissen inquired. I mean Jews as Yamaji is about to discipline ya, the alarm rings, and your punishment's postponed, Jin explained. That means if ya do well against these intruders, then Yamaji might forgive your little mistake at the west gate and choose not to punish ya. An edge entered the rigid man's voice, I hope you are not insinuating that I have manipulated this attack on the Siridi. Course not, the fox replied easily. You're not that smart. Ichimaru Taiko, Tissen said evenly, if your intent is nothing more than to aggravate me, then please save it for when we are not under attack from intruders. Without waiting for a response, the sightless captain strode off. At the edge of his peripheral vision, Jin noticed Aizen giving him a subtle glance of his own. Yeah, got something to say, Aizen Taiko, he asked as he turned towards him. Only that your humor was poorly timed, the 5th Division captain replied. As Tissen Taiko pointed out, we are about to be invaded. Ya really think he'd find my teasin funnier at any other time? Probably not, Aizen admitted with a slight smile. Come on, let's go before Yamamoto so Taiko scolds us. It did not escape Jin's notice that Hichugaya was giving him and Aizen considering looks as they departed for good. Whatever suspicions the little captain had about the pair of them, Jin was sure they would be incorrect. Still, it might be a little fun to tease the white-haired youngster's paranoia. Maybe some other time, after this invasion business was over and done with. Emergency alert. Emergency alert. Intruders in the Siridi. All divisions take defense positions. Repeat. Kira Izuru jogged briskly through the streets, following only a few steps behind his captain. Look. The yell halted both officers, and they turned their heads in search for whatever had caught the attention of the caller. Coming in from the west was a small bright light, appearing just a little larger than the morning star as it streaked through the clouds and towards the invisible walls of the Siridi. Kira gasped as he saw the light directly hit the Shokunmaku, and continued to push against the resistance. Which should have been impossible, as anything that small should have been destroyed immediately. He looked to his captain to gauge his reaction, but quickly realized the futility of that maneuver. As always, Hichugaya's face was as cold and as impassive as an iceberg. Even when faced with intruders doing what should be impossible, that did not change now. They're getting through, Hichugaya noted calmly. If he felt any surprise at this, it was not evident in his voice. The blonde lieutenant jerked his head back upwards with a start and saw that his superior was right. With a crackling of electrical energy and ripples across the anti-soul shield, the small sphere of light had succeeded in penetrating through the outer walls of the Siriti. A moment later, there was an explosion, and 4 orange streaks of light split off into different directions. So, there are at least 4 of them. That matches up with Tissan's report that there were 5 intruders who attempted to enter through the west gate. Hichugaya continued to note coolly, and finally looked at his second-in-command. Kira, alert the rest of the division, tell them to begin their patrols closest to where those Ryoko land. Yes, sir, he confirmed, and set off to carry out his orders. Jin had yet to come back from the captain's meeting, so Rangiku took it upon herself to organize the third in response to the Ryoka invasion. She led her own personal patrol through the corridors of the Siriti to intercept the invaders, and kept her eyes on the sky as they neared the light source above them. From the looks of the trajectory, it was very likely that one of the Ryoka would land near their position. Get ready, Rangiku commanded as she saw that the meteor-like object was rapidly closing in on them. She and her subordinates stopped and put their swords into position, but just as the unidentified falling object was about to crash into them, it suddenly brightened and then disappeared. Rangiku blinked in confusion at the unexpected lack of an enemy to fight. Did anyone else see a black cat in there? Judging by the "are you mad" looks they gave her, she surmised they had not. Well, whatever it was, they needed to find it. While she could not detect any foreign ryotsu nearby, surely the invader, feline or not, could not have gotten far. The reddening of the horizon alerted Rangiku that her patrol time was nearly at an end, much to her relief. Despite searching since the break-in at dawn, with only a 30-minute break for lunch, she had no more luck in finding the Ryoka than the rest of the Godi 13 did. Then again, since everyone who had encountered the Ryoka ended up in the 4th, perhaps luck was on her side. With each new report that came in, the bar kept getting higher and higher as to determining the strength and power of the invaders. Rangiku was just about to call an end to her patrol when she felt a familiar spiritual signature clash with a foreign one not too far away. "Renji," she gasped out, and then spun to face her subordinates. "Abarai Renji is in combat with the enemy. We have to get to him as quickly as possible." But by the time they arrived, the fight was already over. And to Ranjiku's shock and horror, it was not in her friend's favor. Renji was lying face down in a steadily growing puddle of his own blood, and his spiritual pressure was dwindling by the second. 2 of her men rushed forward to check on the fallen lieutenant's condition. Rangiku realized that even after all the casualties they had suffered, the Godi 13 had underestimated the Ryoka. If they were able to beat Renji, one of the stronger lieutenants, in a fight, then that meant only the captains were able to stop the invasion now. "It seems his opponent has escaped," one of her men noted. "Should we follow?" Rangiku focused her thoughts on the current situation. On the one hand, while the Ryoka had indeed defeated Renji, she found it highly unlikely that it was an easy victory for him. Considering that the clash had ended only minutes before, the assailant could not have gotten far. If they pursued now, then it meant a greater chance of catching up with the invader and defeating him while still recovering from his battle wounds. But that idea quickly ended after she sensed how Renji's spiritual reserves were draining. He needed medical attention now. No, she finally decided. Prepare a stretcher, and take him to the nearest relief station. She did not even want to send an officer or 2 after the Ryoka, because she knew that even if they caught up with him, it would end with their defeat. After all, if the intruder could defeat Renji and walk away without leaving too much blood behind for a trail, then that meant he was not heavily injured enough to fall before a couple of low-ranking Shinigami. Rangiku supposed she could have pursued the Ryoka herself, but decided that it might be a better idea to ensure Renji's well-being first. After they had ensured the safe transport of the patient, Rangiku dismissed her men. She stayed, not only because Renji needed someone to look out for him, but also because she felt 2 familiar Shinigami fast approaching the relief station. Within seconds after her men had left, Kira and Hinamori rushed into the room. "We felt Abarai-kun's levels disappear," the petite girl blurted out. "Is he all right?" "He's not dead," Rangiku assured her. "But he is heavily wounded. However, I do think that he'll survive if a healer tends to his wounds soon. I'll call the 4th Division, and have them send an advanced relief unit, Kira volunteered. That will be unnecessary. The three lieutenants froze as they heard the taciturn voice of Renji's commanding officer. They turned to find Kukaki Byakuya making his way into the room. Kukaki Teiko. Hinamori said inquiringly, as if she did not believe the words that had emerged from the noble's mouth. He continued as if she had not spoken. Put him in a holding cell. But he fought a Ryoka by himself. Hinamori protested. I will not hear excuses, Kukaki cut off her words. To enter a fight alone means that defeat is utterly unacceptable. I have no need of a fool who does not comprehend that. He is an eyesore. Take him this instant. With his order declared, the lord turned and walked away. Hinamori was incensed by the lack of regard for the lieutenant's condition. Her fists clenched in fury, and impulsively she called out, Please wait a moment. You make it sound like Abarai-kun dash. Don't. Kira snapped his arm up in front of her to prevent the girl from being insubordinate to the strict captain, who had merely stopped and turned his head after she had started protesting. Kira-kun. Rangiku could tell that the betrayed tone in Hinamori's voice stung Kira, but the elder woman understood his reasoning. If he had not stopped her, she had no idea what Captain Kukaki would have done to ensure the girl knew her place. If a condemned sister and unconscious lieutenant were any indication, the results would not have been good. My deepest apologies, Kira said as he bowed to the waist. Reluctantly, Hinamori seemed to understand his intention, following his lead and forced out, My deepest apologies. Rangiku was third in the procession as she bowed to the waist and repeated their statement of penance. Satisfied that the lieutenants knew how to show the proper respect towards their betters, Captain Kukaki left without another word. After he was gone, the three of them straightened up, and Rangiku spoke first. Now that he's gone, let's follow orders and take Renji to the holding cells. But he's injured. Hinamori protested. To the holding cells in the 4th Division, Rangiku finished with a smirk. Kira and Hinamori blinked, and the latter smiled in relief at her exploitation of the loophole. Yes, but the 4th is a bit far, Kira pointed out. I'm not sure if it would be a good idea to carry him all the way there, considering the state of his injuries. And since Kukaki Teiko ordered us not to call them here. Actually, I already sent the request, Rangiku admitted. I knew Renji would need major healing done, so I sent a hell butterfly to the 4th as we transported him here. So when Kukaki Teiko told us not to, Kira said hesitantly. He didn't think we already had, Hinamori chirped with relief. Very sneaky, a new voice said in approval. Rangiku yelped in surprise, and the trio of lieutenants turned to see Jin leaning against the wall as if he had been there all along. Jin. Rangiku scolded, how many times do I have to tell you not to surprise me like that? But it's so much fun, he teased, pushing himself off the wall and joining the three vice-captains. You won't think it's fun if I die of a heart attack because you snuck up on me one time too many, Rangiku growled. Well then, all I have to do is not sneak up on ya one time too many, Jin smirked back. Excuse me, Ichimaru Teiko, Hinamori hesitantly asked. Why are you here? Jews wanted to spend time with my beautiful wife, Jin answered. Rangiku tried to hold back a smile. She was not quite ready to give up her glare on him yet, but his compliments eroded her desire to continue it. Oh, and to make sure she don't get into trouble for Kallen, the 4th when Kukaki Teiko told her not to, he went on. If he raises a stink, I'll say that I called M. You don't need to do that, Rangiku protested. You're a lieutenant, Jin retorted. He's a captain. If ya do something he don't like, Kukaki Teiko can get ya into trouble for insubordination. If I do something he don't like, all he can do is throw daggers with his eyes. Got it. Rangiku nodded, and finally decided that her husband no longer deserved her glare. So, ya ready to go yet? The silver captain asked his wife. Not yet, she responded. I want to make sure the healers get here. He shrugged. Looks like Abarai got himself into some trouble. The three lieutenants jumped and looked at Hichugaya, who had appeared behind their backs in the same silent, sudden manner as Kukaki and Jin. With all the captains sneaking up on them, Rangiku would not have been surprised if iPhone decided to drop by and give them a heart attack before the night was over. Toshiro! Hinamori cried out, the most startled of the three lieutenants. "It's Hichuga Yuteko, in case you've forgotten," he coolly corrected. "Are you sure you want to address your superior in such an informal way?" "Never mind that. More importantly, why don't you captains make any noise when you walk?" demanded a frustrated Hinamori, irked by the fact that this was the third time in so many minutes that she had been startled in such a way. Jin, the only one unperturbed by Hichuga's sudden appearance, took in the scene with amusement, but the arrival of this captain spooked Rangiku, as evidenced by the fact that her hand had dropped to her Zanpakuto the moment she heard his voice. On the surface, there were not that many differences between Kukaki and Hichuga. They were both sticklers for the rules, kept a nearly emotionless mask on their face, and based on available evidence, they were almost completely heartless. But the fact of the matter was, Rangiku felt marginally safer around the noble than she did around the new prodigy. While both could be relied upon to uphold the law of the Siritii, the former did it out of responsibility and pride in his noble duties. Hichuga, on the other hand, was a wild card to her. She had to admit, Rangiku did not have a solid reason to fear the captain of the 10th. His official record marked him as a powerful and efficient Shinigami, and had indeed earned his Haori despite his young age. His reputation among the lower ranks was a bit more ambiguous. Everyone in the 10th claimed Hichuga as the best captain, but it was par for the course among the rank and file of each division to idolize their commanding officer. However, even they would admit that Hichuga seemed to care little for the lives of his men. Yes, he was by the book and ensured all the needs of the 10th Division were tended to according to regulations, but it was all just cold maintenance. None of the above reasons were sufficient enough to explain why Rangiku felt goosebumps every time Hichuga came near her. She wanted to pass it off as a side effect of his icy Ryutsui missions, but no one else seemed bothered by it like she was. True, Hichuga seemed to have a little soft spot for Hinamori, but despite Rangiku's close friendship with the girl, she could not bring herself to like the creepy teenager. The Shinigami Women's Association was holding an event where members would be naisans to some of the new initiates for 1 week. Rangiku was partnered up with the 5th seed from the 5th Division, a petite brunette by the name of Hinamori Momo. The elder sister was glad that she got this adorable sweetheart as her little sister. The two had hit it off immediately upon meeting each other, and now they were chatting excitedly with each other as Rangiku led Hinamori to some of her favorite shops. "Toshiro!" Hinamori suddenly called out as she glanced to the side and caught sight of someone. She waved at the person enthusiastically, and Rangiku turned to examine the new arrival. The boy apparently named Toshiro was short, serious, and holding a stack of paperwork under his left arm. And cute, very cute. He was not cute as in, "I'd like to have a drink with this guy." He was cute as in, "I want to snuggle up with him like he's a teddy bear." He was looking at the girl calling his name with mild annoyance. As the two girls walked up to him, he informed the brunette, "It's Hichuga Fukotaiko now, Hinamori." That was when Rangiku glanced down to his arm for the first time and saw the badge denoting his rank. "I haven't seen you at the lieutenant meetings before," she said. "I was just recently promoted," Toshiro told the other lieutenant. "There hasn't been a meeting for the lieutenants since my appointment yet." "Congratulations," Rangiku smiled in an attempt to be friendly, but it fell flat at the white-haired youth's icy composure. Still, she was not discouraged yet. "Oh, it looks like someone needs a hug." The boy fixed her with a frozen glare, and all desire to hug the cutie went cold with it. Hichuga's adorable appearance hid it very well, but now that he was being threatened with physical contact, Rangiku could now clearly see how his eyes held all the warmth of a polar winter. Those eyes warned her that if she so much as opened her arms to hold him, he would retaliate. "But since you don't seem to be the hugging type, I won't," Rangiku finished out loud. Nei-san, you said the shop you wanted to show me was nearby," Hinamori intervened nervously, obviously detecting the new tension in the air, and then said to Hichuga, "I'll see you later, Toshiro." The boy simply nodded at her and continued on his way. "Sorry about Toshiro," Hinamori apologized to Rangiku as they walked on. "He's not really a people person." "I noticed," Rangiku commented dryly. "What are you doing here anyway?" Hinamori continued on, but then paused in her rant as her brain caught up with her words, and then asked in a calmer tone, "Why are you here?" "I came to see for myself the type of power we are facing," Hitsugaya replied as he glanced over the condition of the unconscious redhead. I had heard that at least one of the Ryoka is strong enough to defeat a lieutenant. He paused and looked directly at Hinamori. And that is why I'm now assigning Kira to be your escort. Toshiro, she protested indignantly. I can take care of myself. Hinamori, this is common sense, he rebutted. We're dealing with foes that can send lieutenants to the 4th Division. It is simply not safe for anyone under the rank of captain to travel alone. This measure is as much for Kira as it is for you. I'll be with other officers of the 5th, so it's not like I'll be by myself. And are they here right now? No. And do you believe that they are equal in strength to Kira? No, but he still has duties in the 10th, doesn't he? Kira, Toshiro turned to his lieutenant, which do you consider a higher priority, your normal duties in the 10th, or the safety of Hinamori? Hinamori-kun's safety, Kira replied without hesitation. The girl threw up her hands in frustration. Both of you are overprotective. I'll be fine. Hinamori, which rank is higher, captain or lieutenant? The ice-haired officer now asked. Captain, she answered reluctantly. Then, as captain, I am ordering you to let Kira be your escort. You're hopeless, Hinamori sighed, and then smiled slightly. But I guess I should be thankful that I have 2 good friends looking out for me. Rangiku noted with amusement that Kira flushed at Hinamori's words, and the optimistic part of herself which looked for the good parts in everyone thought it saw a similar hue painting Hitsugaya's cheeks for a brief moment. More likely though, it was just her imagination. Ichimaru, Hitsugaya turned his attention to the other captain. We need to go, Yamamoto has called another emergency meeting. Another one? This invasion is keeping everyone busy, the silver captain lamented, and then pecked his wife on the lips. See ya later. Rangiku gave her husband a parting smile as she nodded back, and the 2 captains left the room. You know he only gave you that excuse so you would agree to being escorted, Kira commented after the 2 prodigies had left. He's just being overprotective, Hinamori protested, a slight pink coloring her cheeks. Toshiro's always been cold towards most people, but once you get to know him, he's really caring. Kira noticed Rangiku giving a slight roll of her eyes, but thankfully, she held her silence. He knew Hitsugaya was not one of her favorite people, but she rarely made an issue of it for her friend's sake. I think it's more accurate to say that he's caring towards you, Hinamori-kun, he corrected wryly. What's that supposed to mean? She frowned at him, not liking the knowing tone in his voice. Rangiku let a slight smirk eerily similar to her husband's come to her face at Hinamori's defensive reply. It's always cold around the captain's office in the 10th Division, Kira explained. Cold enough that everyone there wears extra layers of clothing beneath our uniforms. But it is always noticeably warmer whenever you visit. You're just imagining things, it's never that cold when I come there, and I never feel it warm up. That's because he can feel your ryotsu before you arrive, Kira replied. And the rest of us can tell when you're coming too, by the way the temperature rises. I bet if I borrowed a thermometer from Kuratsuka Fukutaiko, that it would detect a difference of no less than 5 degrees Celsius between your presence and absence in the immediate vicinity of Hitsugaya Teiko. I bet you a week's worth of paperwork duties that you're wrong. Done, Kira immediately agreed, a slight smirk curving his lips. Yeah no, Jin commented as he walked with Hitsugaya to the captain's meeting room. Oh, these days, ya gotta tell me what ya did to make Rangiku so scared. Oh, yeah. It's not deliberate, the white-haired captain replied in a manner neither defensive nor bothered. It's irrational on her part, I have no reason to hurt her. And as long as ya keep up that attitude, I'm fine. A little bit of fear will be good for Rangiku, it'll keep her on her toes, and stop her from getting too lazy. I'm surprised you would take that view. I would have expected you to be more protective of her. I respect her now that I let her fight her own battles, I only butt in when I think she's in over her head. This fear she's got is something she needs to take care of on her own. If I get between her and then I won't be doing her any good. An interesting philosophy, Hitsugaya noted. Ain't so interesting, Jin argued. After all, I ain't always gonna be able to protect her, so I gotta make sure she can do it herself. Hitsugaya just let out an interested I think ya understand, the sly captain continued. Since you're so protective oh, Hinamari-chanen, anyone with eyes can tell ya have a soft spot for her. Toshiro did not even look at him when he spoke. Then how do you know? Hey, I got eyes. You couldn't tell by me. Wow, Hichuga Yuteico-s got a sense of humor after all. I gotta call Hisagi-kun so he can make that his big story in the next issue of Seirei Communications. The smaller captain's response was to narrow his eyes at his annoying company. Seriously, though, Jin continued, ya need to lighten up. I've noticed that ya don't like to be friendly with too many people. You are hardly a social butterfly yourself. Whatcha mean? I love talking to people. Yes, but very rarely will you actually let anyone in and actually get to know you. Most of your interactions are superficial and involve teasing others. Jin was quiet for a moment, and then let out what seemed to be a sheepish chuckle. Yeah, got me, the smiling man admitted. I like talking to people, but I don't trust 'em easily. Not a bad opinion to hold, Hichugaya said. Yeah, but ya can take it too far, Jin said. Everyone should have at least one person they can trust with anything. Yeah, know what I mean. For a moment, Hichugaya did not reply, but the silver man knew he saw a glimpse of thoughtfulness in his features, despite his face retaining its icy exterior. I believe I do, he finally answered. Chapter 3, Murder in the Court. Rangiku, Kira, and Hinamori were all sitting by the unconscious Renji's side when a messenger arrived to inform them of the wartime special orders from Yamamoto. I'd better get back to my division, Rangiku said as soon as the messenger left. And you two should as well. Yes, Kira agreed, and stood up. Hinamori gave a guilty glance to Renji. He'll be fine, the blonde assured her. The Fourth's healers will keep a close eye on him. The girl nodded and followed her friends out the door. Good luck, you two, Rangiku told them before they split up. Don't run into any Ryoka. Why didn't you insist on escorting Rangiku-san, too? Hinamori asked as they went towards the 5th division. First of all, because Hichuga Yuteico made your safety the priority, Kira started. And second, the third is not that far away, she'll be fine. And lastly, Rangiku-san is just as strong as Abarai-kun, and she's far less reckless to boot. She has better sense than to get in a fight she isn't sure she'll win. I still say that I can take care of myself, Hinamori pouted lightly. And Hichuga Yuteico was not convinced by your arguments, Kira reminded her. That's because he's overprotective, she complained, and pointed an accusatory finger at him. And so are you. Staying by your side during a time of invasion is not overprotection, he rebutted calmly, despite the prosecuting digit being jabbed in his direction. It is simply a precautionary measure. He paused, and a smirk appeared on his face. And consider yourself lucky that the Ryoka are only powerful enough to defeat a lieutenant. If they get any stronger, Hichuga Yuteico would probably never let you out of his sight. Hichuga Yuteico is very protective of you, isn't he? Despite the warmth of the comment, both lieutenants jumped as Aizen announced his presence without warning behind them. Aizen Teiko, not you, too, Hinamori whined as she held her hand to her rapidly beating heart. Hinamari-kun, he asked in mild confusion. First Kukaki Teiko, then Ichimaru Teiko, and then Toshiro, and now you, she ranted. Is it a requirement for captains to sneak up on poor little lieutenants and scare them out of their wits? No, sorry I startled you too, he apologized, but did not quite succeed in holding back an amused smile. He looked at Kira, so Hichuga Yuteico ordered you to escort Hinamari-kun. Correct, the younger man confirmed, and ignored his friend's mutterings of overprotective under her breath. Thank you for looking after her, Aizen said graciously to the dutiful friend. And give my thanks to your captain as well, for thinking of Hinamari-kun's safety. I will, he replied. Since I'm sure you have other things to attend to, I will let you go now, the captain said with polite dismissal. If I might suggest, Aizen Teiko, Hinamori smirked mischievously, I think Kira-kun should stay with us. After all, since the Ryoka are capable of defeating lieutenants, it simply would not be safe for anyone below captain level to be out alone at night. And Toshiro did say that the escort was for Kira-kun's safety as well for mine. Kira gave her a very flat look, wondering when exactly she had gained that impish streak of hers. On gut instinct, he put the blame on Ichimaru, both of them. Aizen smiled and agreed, good thinking, Hinamari-kun. Kira-kun, you should stay with us, we'll escort you back to the 10th. Yes, sir, Kira relented, and sent another look at the petite girl. She simply smiled back at him, sweetness and innocence etched into her face. The last time he had seen a look like that, he had been confronted by a yachiru asking for candy. How is Abarai-kun's condition? Aizen inquired as they walked through the corridors of the Siriti. The healers say he'll be fine, now that he has medical attention, Kira answered, and gave up his silent chastisement of his academy friend. It's a good thing Rangiku-san was there, Hinamori said. She was able to get word to some people from the 4th before Kukaki Teiko came and told us not to. She disobeyed a captain. Aizen cocked an eyebrow in curiosity, but not quite in judgment. It's not like that, she rushed to explain. Kukaki Teiko just told us to take Abarai-kun to a holding cell, and Rangiku-san suggested the holding cells in the 4th division. Besides, the official report will state that Ichimaru Teiko was the one who requested the healers, Kira added calmly. I'm glad, Aizen said with approval. Abarai-kun is a good officer, and I can't think of anyone who would be glad to see him die. Except Kukaki Teiko, Hinamori grumbled. Hinamari-kun, Kira quietly reprimanded her. I'm sorry, but it's true, she snapped back. You two are free to speak your mind when you're with me, Aizen permitted. I assure you, Kukaki Teiko will not hear your opinions of him from me. But still, even if we don't like Kukaki Teiko's decisions, it's not our place to question them, the blonde said cautiously. He was going to let Abarai-kun die. Hinamori protested vehemently. And I can understand a little how Kukaki Teiko might be miffed that his lieutenant lost a fight, as it would upset his oh-so-special pride, but why deny him healers? Why wasn't a holding cell enough for him? It is possible that Kukaki Teiko underestimated the extent of Abarai-kun's injuries, Aizen reasoned, and continued before Hinamori could voice her skepticism. At the captain's meeting, Kukaki Teiko made a motion for harsher punitive action against Abarai-kun. Don't worry, the motion failed, but I do not think that he would have done so if he believed his lieutenant would be dead in the morning. I guess so, she admitted, and then asked, were you one of the captains who opposed the motion? Indeed, Aizen affirmed. As I said before, Abarai-kun is a good man, and a great asset to the Godai 13. Out of curiosity, Kira supplicated, how did Ichimaru Teiko and Hitsugaya Teiko react to the motion? Hitsugaya Teiko abstained, stating that the affairs of other divisions were not his concern, the captain answered. He said that right after he made Kira-kun be my escort. Hinamori asked incredulously, and then growled, oh, that hypocrite. When I see him again, I'm going to have words. Aizen just smiled in amusement at his lieutenant as she muttered darkly under her breath, and continued to answer Kira's question. Ichimaru Teiko was also one who opposed Kukaki Teiko's proposal, but he did not really elucidate on his reasons. Why do you ask? Ichimaru Teiko was the one who offered to cover Rangiku-san's actions as his own, the lieutenant of the 10th explained. And I was wondering. He paused in his question, and tried to find the proper way to put his inquiry into words. How far his charity went, Aizen finished after he had noticed Kira's hesitance. I can understand your curiosity, Ichimaru Teiko is an unpredictable man. Both lieutenants chuckled nervously and nodded in agreement. Unpredictable was probably the kindest and most charitable description of the fox's personality. How has the 10th fared during the invasion? Aizen asked Kira. We haven't lost as many as the 11th, the blonde man answered. And fortunately, we haven't had any deaths yet. Same here, Hinamori said. It's like the Ryoka don't want to kill anyone. I wonder why. I don't know, Kira shrugged. But it doesn't matter, they are still the enemy, and they have attacked us. Therefore we need to eliminate them. I guess, his colleague frowned. Still, I don't like it. Neither do I, the solemn lieutenant agreed. But war is something you shouldn't like. It encourages us to end fights as quickly as possible, and to make us hesitate from starting a battle in the first place. Who told you that? Hinamori asked. Ichimaru Teiko, although not in so many words, he explained. I may be the lieutenant of the 10th division, but I learned how to fight in the 3rd. Here's the main office, Aizen noted. "Thank you for taking care of us," the younger man bowed. "It's no trouble," the captain replied. "Have a good night." "Good night," Kira returned, and entered the building. "I'll walk you back to your quarters," Aizen said to his lieutenant after Kira was gone. "I don't think Hitsugaya Teiko would ever forgive me if I let you go by yourself during the invasion." "Only if it's not inconvenient for you," Hinamori responded quickly. "It isn't," he reassured her. "After all, one of the duties of a captain is to ensure the well-being of his subordinates." Hinamori beamed at her captain, and chirped a thank you. One of the things she loved most about Captain Aizen was his concern about those who served under him. Especially with Captain Kukaki's apathy towards Renji fresh in her mind, her own captain's warm actions and kind words shined even brighter to her. As they walked back to the barracks, the two senior officers of the 5th Division spent time on idle chatter and updates on the 5th Division's condition since the invasion had started. They arrived at Hinamari's door, and Aizen smiled. "Good night, Hinamari-kun," as he slid the door open. "Good night, Aizen Teiko," she said back to him warmly. "I'll see you tomorrow," he told her, and walked away. "You, too," she replied, shutting the door. The repeated anxieties of this day encouraged Hinamori to seek out her futon quickly, where she soon fell into a deep and dreamless sleep. Hinamori reluctantly stirred from her slumber as her clock's chime roused her. She gave a generous stretch and looked at the time. Still an hour before she had to leave for the lieutenant's meeting later that morning. Reluctantly, she extracted herself from the comforting warmth of her blanket, and got ready for the new day. After she got dressed and prepared, Hinamori did not really have much on her mind as she calmly walked to the meeting. She was near her destination when she heard something that reminded her of a leaky faucet dripping water into a tub. Irrepressible curiosity made her detour to investigate the unknown sound. The girl stopped in place when she saw a puddle of blood on the floorboards. Her eyes slowly trailed upwards to discover the source of the crimson fluid. And when she saw the reason for the sanguine stains, Hinamori screamed. A wail of anguish brought the lieutenants out of the meeting room and towards the cry's source. The first on the scene found Hinamori looking upward with a face that matched the pain of her shriek. As they set their eyes on what she saw, they too understood her reaction. There was no need to ask what had brought her to this state. For there, impaled on his own sword high on the wall, hung the corpse of Captain Aizen Sosuke. "Aizen Teiko," Hinamori said softly, walking stiffly forward a few steps. "No." She took 2 more unstable steps forward before she fell to her knees and screamed, "Aizen Teiko! What's going on?" The dumbstruck lieutenants turned around to see Captain Hitsugaya approaching, appearing as cold as ever. Upon setting sights on Aizen's corpse, he simply raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh." Hinamori turned around slowly, and looked at the newly arrived Teiko. Her mind was in shambles, completely lost from the shock of her captain's death. With all coherent thought in disarray, the girl acted on gut instinct and emotional impulse. She launched herself at Hitsugaya. The captain only had a moment to react before she wrapped her arms around his chest, and broke down sobbing. The other lieutenants stared as the glacier of a Shinigami stood awkwardly for a moment. Then he relaxed and gently put an arm around the crying girl. "Kira, call for the 4th Division to get Aizen's body down from there," Hitsugaya ordered. "I'll take care of Hinamori." "Yes, sir," the blonde lieutenant replied, and the white-haired captain walked away, half carrying his old friend. "I don't know what I find more incredible," Hisagi said after they were out of earshot. "The fact that she chose him as a shoulder to cry on, or the fact that he let her cry on his shoulder. I don't know what she sees in him," Rangiku shuddered. "The kid scares me." "That kid is a prodigy and a captain," Kira interjected tersely as he prepared a hell butterfly. "Of course he should scare you." "I know, but he doesn't scare me like the other captains do," she replied. "There's something about him that just makes me want to spend the rest of my days hiding in a desert." "I would have thought that you'd be used to scary captains, considering who you married," Iba remarked. "Hey, Jin's not that bad once you get to know him." "While Ichimaru Teiko is creepy, I don't think he's as bad as Hitsugaya," Hisagi agreed. "At least with Ichimaru Teiko, we know he has a heart to go along with that creepiness." "Please keep in mind that this is my captain we're talking about," Kira warned as he let the message flutter away to the 4th Division. And shouldn't you be sending hell butterflies to your own captains? Toshiro quickly took Hinamori back to her quarters with a few strides of his shunpo. After their arrival, he softly sat her down on her bed. He was about to let go when she clutched the front of his robes tighter. "I'm just going to get you some water," he stated. "I'll be right back." The only response he got was an even tighter grip on his attire. Toshiro sighed softly as he realized that she was not letting go anytime soon. He sat down next to her and resumed holding her. He held on for a few minutes, and simply let the grieving waif have time to expend her emotions before he spoke again. "Hinamori." His gentle call received no answer. "Hinamori." This time the voice was sterner, but yet still without the usual chill present in his words. And like the first time he spoke her name, there was no response. "Hinamori." It was the definite and absolute tone of command that finally snapped the girl out of her trance and brought her to attention. "Shiro-chan, Aizen Taiko's dead," she said. Her voice cracked at the last word. "I know," he replied, "and I know how much you cared about him, but you must get a hold of yourself." "How can I control myself when he's never going to be there for me again?" she sobbed. "Because you are a lieutenant of the Godai 13, Hinamori. You have responsibilities to your division, doubly so now with Aizen gone. How do you think he would want you to act if something happened to him? Would he prefer you to weep uncontrollably, or would he rather that you take charge and make sure the rest of the people under your command continued performing their duties?" She looked at his face. The tears still stained her blotched cheeks, but new trails were no longer being blazed as she saw the hidden message in her old friend's eyes. "I am still here for you." Hinamori sniffed and wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Thank you, Shiro-chan," she rasped, as her throat was still sore from her crying session. She gave him a parting squeeze around his chest and then released her hold on him. As she got up to fix herself up in the mirror, Toshiro took the opportunity to get that glass of water for her. "How do I look?" Hinamori asked as Toshiro came back. She sounded better, though still a little hoarse. "Good," he answered simply, and handed her the cup. Hinamori quietly drank the water, and then headed for the door. Before she left, she gave her old friend another hug. "Don't worry," said Toshiro as he calmly returned the embrace. "We will find out what happened to Aizen, there will be time for mourning later." "I know," she replied, her voice stable once more. "Thank you again, Shiro-chan." "Hitsugaya Taiko," came the automatic correction, but without any real force behind it, and then said, "I'll escort you to the 5th Division." Despite her mournful mood, Hinamori could not help but let out a quick laugh as she remembered Kira's warning from the previous night. At Toshiro's questioning eyebrow, she explained, "I guess Kira-kun isn't a good enough bodyguard for you anymore. I just want to make sure you don't break down in the middle of the street." "Don't be so mean," she scolded, but on the inside she was smiling. Even though she was lost without Aizen, Hinamori knew she could find her way again as long as she had Toshiro to help her. "Yeah, heard the news." Kiraku and Nanao turned around and saw Ichimaru-jin approaching them, his smile in its usual place. "The news about Aizen Taiko's being killed," Kiraku said. "Yeah, we heard." "Crazy, huh? Do you have any idea on who did it?" Nanao asked. "Nope," Ichimaru answered. "What about ya?" "The obvious answer would be the Ryoka," Kiraku said. "But I'm not sure that's right. I just fought one of them, and he didn't have near enough strength to take on a captain. Even if he did, he wasn't the type who'd pin Aizen Taiko to the wall. And any fight between two captain-level people would be felt from here to the Rokanga," Ichimaru agreed. "So that means Aizen never got to see whoever killed him." "What do you mean?" Nanao asked. "Think about it," Ichimaru explained, "Aizen's killer had to be strong, not to pierce his riot suit, and covert, not to do it without a fight. That means it was a sneak attack. And, let me ask ya this, who do we know that is both captain level and skilled in assassination?" "You don't mean so iPhone dash," the lieutenant of the 8th gasped. "If she were ordered to do it by Yamaji or the Central 46, yeah, she would," Kiraku admitted. "But why would they? His record's spotless. Maybe he poked his nose somewhere the Central 46 didn't like, I dunno," Ichimaru suggested. There's a lot about this that smells fishy. Do you think it's a coincidence that all this is going on because of Kukaki Rukia? Nanao asked. After all, the Ryoka Kiraku Teiko fought said that their objective was to rescue her. That's so. Ichimaru said interestedly. Yeah, I think Aizen Teiko didn't like the verdict, and decided to be a bit too pushy in voicing his opinion to the Central 46. If he protested too much, they could have ordered him dead. But since he was a respected captain, they had him killed secretly and let the Ryoka take the blame, she affirmed. But why would Aizen Teiko take such an interest in saving Kukaki Rukia? I had always heard that he had strong ethics, but did he think it was really worth risking his career, and his life, for this case? Who knows? Ichimaru shrugged. But I think you're right, about one thing, it ain't a coincidence that all this hubbub is happening after Rukia-chan was ordered to be executed. Nanao gave him a considering look. You know, Ichimaru Teiko, so iPhone Teiko is not the only captain with the strength and speed to assassinate someone with Aizen Teiko's power, she informed him. Oh? Yeah, I got someone special in mind, he teased and crossed his arms, his hands hidden inside his sleeves. I do, she replied flatly. Mind tellin' me who you're thinkin' about? The smile did not shift. As always, it masked the man's thoughts from the younger woman. I'm sure you can guess, she said in an even tone. After all, this person once told me that he once considered joining the 2nd Division. Now that's very interesting, but it ain't not to convict someone o' murder. He paused for a moment, and then corrected himself. Actually, it might be, nah, for the 46, now that I think about it. But a smart gal like Ya knows better. For example, Ya need to figure out the motive. Why would this guy you're thinking of wanna kill Aizen Teiko? This same person also mentioned to me that Aizen Teiko was not exactly as he appeared. Yeah, and so's Shunsui, Ichimaru rebutted. As a matter of fact, nobody in the CRIDI ain't what they appear to be. Indeed, Nanao concurred. However, suppose this individual I'm thinking of discovered that Aizen Teiko harmed or threatened to harm someone close to him. It would not be uncharacteristic of this person to exact vengeance without consulting official channels. Oh, a revenge story, this is getting good, he exclaimed with a tone that sounded like enthusiasm. But do ya have any proof that Aizen Teiko did any sort o' threatening that would lead to this person wanting to kill him? I do not, she admitted calmly. I am simply stating that the list of suspects cannot be limited to so iPhone Teiko. Very true, her verbal sparring partner agreed. For example, Ichimaru leaned over so he was eye level with the brunette, and his face was within inches of hers. Nanao kept her expression sang-froid. While she was one of the few people brave enough to call herself a friend of Ichimaru-jin, she still got the shivers when he was on creepy mode. She had known this man since she was a girl, but that was part of the problem. She knew he had the capabilities to pull off a secret assassination, even if he had a point in saying there was a lack of motive present. What about the guy who actually trained this person you're thinking of? Nanao went from suspicious to furious in 1 second flat. How dare you suggest that Kyo dash? Ichimaru boldly cut off her words by pressing a long, thin finger to her lips. It took every ounce of Nanao's self-preservation not to slap his hand away. Careful, the snake smirked. If ya say such things so loudly, the wrong people might get the wrong ideas. With that warning said, Ichimaru removed his digit from her mouth. I don't think we should be pointing fingers at each other, Kiraku chuckled, intervening between his former and current vice-captains before anything else could be said, especially with the invasion going on. After we capture the Ryoka, we can ask them what they know. In the meantime, let's get along, okay? Nanao nodded curtly, and Ichimaru gave a single, lighter nod of his own. Now, if y'all will excuse me, there's someone I need to visit, the fox said. See you later, Jin, Kiraku waved. After the other captain had left, Kiraku turned to his lieutenant and asked, Nanao-chan, why are you so suspicious of him? I'm sorry, Kiraku Teiko, but Aizen Teiko's death makes no sense, she apologized. It's a puzzle with too many pieces missing, and it's irritating. And so you take it out on your old lieutenant? Kind of harsh, don't you think? She was silent. Do you really think that Jin had something to do with Aizen's death? Finally, Nanao let out a sigh. No, she conceded. You're right, he didn't deserve my accusations, I'll apologize to him later. Good, Kirako smiled. I don't like it when my friends fight. Ichimaru. Jin turned to his caller in concealed surprise. Hitsugaya Teiko, he greeted cheerfully. What ya need? It ain't often ya come to talk to me. While the younger captain always had the facial composure of an ice statue, his eyes were on extra frosty as he approached. You know Aizen was murdered, Hitsugaya stated. Yep, Jin confirmed. Then you should also know that Hinamori nearly had a nervous breakdown after finding Aizen's body, the younger prodigy continued. Really, the fox's smile dropped just a little. I'll make sure Rangiku and I visit her when we got the time. I'm sure she'll appreciate that, Hitsugaya said. But what I came to tell you was this, if I find that you are the one responsible for hurting Hinamori, I will kill you. Oh, what brought this on? Jin asked, the corners of his mouth lifting up again. This was the second time in so many hours someone had accused him of killing Aizen, and this time it wasn't as subtle. Despite the ugly eyes he was getting from multiple sources, Jin was not too worried about being a genuine suspect. If the Godai 13 truly considered him a candidate as Aizen's murderer, he would have already been arrested by the Onmitsukido and put behind bars. He was interested in hearing what Hitsugaya's reasons were. I've seen the way you interact with Aizen, the white-haired teenager explained. You never trusted him like the other captains did. I wonder if you decided to eliminate someone you considered a potential threat without authorization, and then allow the Ryoka to take the blame. Between the two of us, I think you're the one who's more suspicious of his fellow captains, Jin pointed out. Perhaps. Perhaps not, Hitsugaya admitted. Either way, I will be keeping my eye on you, Ichimaru. Adamant on letting that sentence be the last word of their conversation, the 10th's commanding officer disappeared in a buzz of shunpo. The Vulpin captain shook his head. Really, the way Hitsugaya and Nanao were putting it, they made it sound like he had some sort of grudge against Aizen. Well, whatever reasons they had, it didn't really matter. Jin was far more interested in what Zaraki Kenpeki had to say. Members of the 5th Division, Hinamori announced to the patrol leaders gathered in their division's meeting hall, as you most likely heard, Aizen Teiko has been murdered. It took every ounce of her willpower to keep from breaking down in tears as she had earlier. Even though she managed to keep a stable state of mind, her eyes could not stop from filling up. Hinamori was not the only one affected by the death of their captain. She could see the saddened and angry expressions on the faces of her subordinates. Captain Aizen had treated them all well. Of all the people who had to be killed during the invasion, why did it have to be a good man like him? I know that you are all feeling the loss, Hinamori continued. But I also know that he would want us to continue performing our duties to the best of our abilities. And don't worry, we will find out who killed Aizen Teiko. Was it one of the Ryoka? The 6th seat asked, her tone belligerent. Hinamori wanted to say yes immediately, but her time with Toshiro had cleared her head, and she had done some thinking. While it was confirmed that one of the Ryoka was indeed powerful enough to tackle with Zaraki Kenpeki, the fight had been loud enough to be detected by almost everyone in the Siriti. And then there was the fact that Captain Aizen was one of the most powerful individuals in the Godai 13, rivaling even Yamamoto in strength. Such a fight would not have gone unnoticed. But on the other hand, who else could have done it? No one saw what happened, but that is most likely the case, Hinamori answered. That's why our orders are now to capture the Ryoka alive, if possible, for questioning. There was general grumbling from the crowd, and she could not blame them. She was more than tempted herself to just accidentally kill the Ryoka to avenge Aizen Teiko. But she knew he would not approve of that. He would have wanted her to get all the information first, and then make sure that the punishment was dealt accordingly. I understand your feelings, Hinamori said out loud, but if you do come across the Ryoka, call for backup immediately. If they're strong enough to kill Aizen Teiko, then they'll be able to kill us without effort. This time grudging acceptance was more solid at her orders. Are there any other questions? The lieutenant inquired. After a moment of silence, she declared, good luck. Dismissed. Yatter, Jin commented as he approached the supine form of Kenpeki on his futon in the 11th Division barracks. Yeah, look like you've had some fun. Kenpeki chuckled quietly, too wounded to provide more of a reaction. Anohana had treated his injuries, but she had firmly recommended in her own special way that he take it easy for the rest of the day. "Yeah, I did, but I lost," he replied. "Yeah, lost? Wow, these Ryoka are getting stronger and stronger. Which one did ya fight?" "The strongest one. His name's Kurosaki Ichigo." Ichimaru leaned up against the wall reflectively and crossed his arms. "That the same guy who beat Ikeku and Abarai-kun?" "Yep. Ken-chan didn't lose. It was a 2-on-1 fight, so it wasn't fair. I tried telling Ken-chan that, but he's not listening," Yachiro piped up defense of her father figure. "Yachiro, Kurosaki was right," Kenpei corrected. "If I want to get stronger, I need to know my sword's name. I already tried asking it, but it didn't give me an answer. Has it been too long?" "Ya really think it'll answer ya on your first try?" Ichimaru asked. The nameless warrior shrugged, and continued, "I'll probably ask again." "Well, best o' luck to ya," his smiling associate said. "So, ya gonna find this Kurosaki and demand a rematch?" "You bet, tomorrow, after I finish resting up," Kenpei grinned. "Don't take too long, remember, he's only gonna be here a short while." "Oh, yeah, Ikaku said he came here to rescue Kukaki's little sister." "I heard the same thing myself," the fox agreed with a tone more thoughtful than normal. "I forgot you had a soft spot for that girl." "Yeah, I think I would have adopted her if Kukaki Teiko hadn't met her first," Jin replied. "She's so fun to tease." "What, you're going to rescue her, too?" "Haven't decided yet." "How about ya? Didn't I just say I wanted to fight Kurosaki again?" "Yeah, so." Kenpei chuckled, and started to rise. "Yeah, I guess I owe the Ryoka one for giving me a good time." "Anohana told ya to stay in bed for the rest of the day, didn't she?" Zaraki paused. There was no trace of fear in his expression. All the same, he slowly sank back down until he was lying on the bed. "Tomorrow," he affirmed, and closed his eyes. Chapter 4, Want Me to Save You? Kira walked just behind his captain as they both approached to where the Sokioku perched in his sealed form. The blonde lieutenant honestly did not like that Kukaki Rukia was going to be executed. It was bad enough that the Central 46 had ordered her death, but wasn't the Sokioku a bit of an overkill? The massive blade was intended for villains so evil or criminals so strong that they required the power of the Sokioku to be executed, and thus remove the risk of reincarnation. How could giving powers to a human qualify this unseated officer of noble blood for oblivion? But there was nothing he could do about it. Orders were orders. They may not always be fair, Kira would be the first to admit, but that was the harsh reality they lived in. The lieutenant was shaken from his brooding as he and Hichugaya joined the line of captains who were present for the execution ceremony. Idly, Kira noted that there were not that many attendees. The absence of representatives from the 12th and 11th was no surprise, and he suspected that Hinamori could not come due to the extra workload forced upon her by Aizen's death. Captains and their adjutants from the 1st, 2nd, and 8th divisions were here, as was Aizen from the 4th, but Anohana had yet to arrive. More surprising was the absence of representatives from the 7th and 9th divisions. Perhaps they deemed the Ryoka hunt dire enough that they excused themselves from the ceremony. He wondered why no one from the 13th was present yet. Perhaps Yukatake did not have the heart to witness the death of his subordinate, or maybe his sickness had reared its ugly head again. It was anyone's guess as to whether Kukaki would bother showing up for his sister's execution. Speaking of which, it was almost noon, so the condemned girl should be arriving shortly. Rukia desperately attempted to identify where Renji's Ryotsu was emanating from, wishing and hoping that her senses might be wrong, and that her oldest friend was not on the precipice of death. She barely registered her escort turning towards her, obviously about to encourage her to start walking again, when they seemed to pause. While she was reluctant to cease her search, the approaching footsteps ensnared Rukia's curiosity, and she turned towards the source. "Mornin'." She recognized the speaker and gave a quiet gulp. "How are ya, Rukia-chan?" Her vision locked with apprehension onto the approaching figure wearing a captain's haori and a serpentine smile. "Ichimaru." "Jin," she uttered. And he wasn't alone. Standing directly to his right was his lieutenant, Ichimaru Rangiku. Rukia relaxed slightly. While the snake's visits were always nerve-wracking, they were more bearable whenever his wife was also present. Upon hearing her nervous response to his casual greeting, the man's grin widened in amusement. My, such familiarity, he noted. Do ya really think that we're close not to use my name like that, Rukia-chan? Rukia did not know what game the captain was playing, so she decided to stick to formality. She was still a Kukaki, even if she was going to be executed, and so she would maintain her dignity even in the face of this menace. I apologize for my rudeness, Ichimaru Teiko, she said, and then turned to the other woman and greeted her. Hello, Ichimaru Fukutaiko. Rukia-san, she replied, and smiled amiably at her. You can call me Rangiku-san, you know. Yeah, we don't care about formalities here, Ichimaru gave a brief chuckle. I was just teasing ya. If I may ask, why are you here? The condemned noble asked politely for Rangiku's sake. While Rukia was not particularly close to her, the warm woman was a buffer zone between her and Ichimaru. I just wanted to ask ya a question, he replied. Yeah no, before ya get annihilated by the Sokyoku. Rukia ignored the remark and inquired, what is it that you wish to ask? Do ya wanna live? The prisoner blinked at the unexpected question, and noticed on her peripheral vision that her guards were shifting uneasily. No doubt unfortunate implications were going through their minds, but they obviously did not know the captain well enough that he would never do something foolish like rescue her. However, that still left the intention behind the question a mystery, so all she could say was, what? Do ya wanna live? He repeated patiently. Rukia paused to choose her next words carefully. I have accepted my fate. That ain't an answer, Rukia-chan. Ya got all these people tryin' to save ya, and here ya are walkin' all nice and quiet to your death. What do ya think will happen to your Ryoka friends if ya die? They'll leave. They won't have any more reason to stay. He actually bared more teeth at her response, and any friendliness that might have been in those upturned lips disappeared. Do ya really think that after all that hard work they put into tryin' to rescue ya, they'd just throw up their hands and go home? What else could they do? Did ya know, Rukia-chan, Ichimaru informed her casually, that Aizen Teiko is the only person who's been killed since the invasion started. The prisoner shook her head. She had not heard much news from within her cell. She had garnered that a captain had been killed in action, but she did not know he was the only fatality of this futile mission to rescue her. Until Renji, she reminded herself despondently. If ya die, it's quite likely that your friends may decide to exact an eye for an eye, the Silver Snake continued on, and his grin seemed to widen at the sight of Rukia's paling face as she realized his train of thought. I wonder how many Shinigami the Ryoka would kill before the captains would go in and put an end to them. They wouldn't, Rukia protested quietly, but fear still crept into her voice. They're not killers. Are ya sure about that? Rukia paused, and for the first time, thought about how her friends would react to her death. She knew that Ichigo was too thick-skulled to realize that she was not worth saving, and so he had placed her under his protection. If she were to die, well, Rukia vividly remembered that look of raw, primal hatred Ichigo had for his mother's murderer. If he felt even a fraction that rage upon learning of his friend's execution, then nothing but his death would stop him from taking revenge on those responsible. Ichimaru nodded at her silence. And ya know that no matter how many Shinigami they kill, your friends will face a captain they won't be able to beat. Right now, our orders are to capture instead o kill, cause of investigate an Aizen Teiko's death, but that might change if your friends decide to go on a vengeance spree. So really, this noble self-sacrifice attitude ya got going is quite useless. If you die, then they'll die. I'll ask Yamamoto for a pardon, Rukia said quickly. He'll have to honor the last request of a Kukaki. After all your friends have done to his precious Godi 13, do ya really think that he'll just let em go? Ichimaru asked. Horror strangled Rukia's body. Several seconds of clear, uninterrupted thought no longer hindered by remorse crept by. And when it was over, to her abiding disbelief, she realized that he was right. Any effort to save her friends by sacrificing her life would be in vain. What else can I do? She whispered out loud. Ya can live. What? Like I said, ya got all these people wantin' to save ya. And, from what I've heard, A lot of people in Seoul society have been helpin' M. The gate guardian, the Shiba, that twitchy lil officer from the 4th, Abarai-kun, and now even Kenpakian, his gang are joinin' in. Rukia was still reeling from the fact that the Shiba clan had aided in the rescue mission. True, she had seen Ganju, but he obviously had not known that he was helping to save the killer of his older brother. But at least one of the Shiba had to have known the identity of the person they were helping to rescue. Why would the entire clan help the person who had murdered Kyan? Wouldn't they be the first in line to see her executed? But those thoughts immediately flew out the window in the shock at the revelation that Zaraki Kenpeki had joined the rescue mission. And she reacted like any other person would, with a drop of her jaw and an exclamation of, "What? Don't ya feel it?" She closed her mouth and concentrated senses on her surroundings. Then she did feel the formidable power of Zaraki facing off with not just one but 2 other captains. What in the name of all spirits in existence had convinced the battle-hungry warrior to help rescue her? Kenpeki told me that one of the Ryoka beat him in a fight, Ichimaru explained, detecting her unspoken question. Kurosaki Ichigo, I think his name was. Rukia gasped and her eyes widened. Did Ichigo really defeat Captain Zaraki? When did he get so strong? Knowin', Kenpeki, that makes Kurosaki his new favorite person, so he'll be helpin' to save ya as his way sayin' thanks, he continued, looking as if he was thoroughly enjoying Rukia's flabbergasted expression. And, as everyone knows, where Kenpeki goes, Yachiro, Ikeku, and Yumichika follow. A full-fledged revolt has been started for the sake of your life, Rukia-chan. The petite girl was speechless for several moments. Then she finally whispered, why? If ya wanna know that, you'll need to ask Kurosaki. My guess is that it was his idea in the first place to rescue ya. Of course it was, the stupid fool. Must be a really great guy to come here and save ya. Might be why everyone's up and joinin' him. Rukia did not trust herself to speak her agreement with Ichimaru's assessment of her friend. So, now that ya know all that, do ya wanna live? He returned to his earlier question. Why is so important for you to know? Rukia asked with more irritation in her voice than she probably should have included. Why don't ya answer the question and find out for yourself? Oh, Jin, stop playing around, Rangiku finally burst out in exasperation, and then looked at the prisoner and demanded, do you want us to save you or not? What? This time the question came not only from Rukia, but her guards as well. Their prior uneasiness was now outright alarm. Why'd ya have to rush? Ichimaru asked petulantly. Because the other captains are bound to notice that their little prisoner is late for her execution, and so we need to be out of here before they realize what we're up to. Rukia-chan hasn't said yes yet. Oh, for the love of... 4 quick executions of Shunpo later, Rukia's escort was on the ground unconscious. There, we've made the decision for her, Rangiku declared. We're saving her whether she likes it or not. What? The girl in question squawked incredulously at the way the woman's line echoed Ichigo's from a couple days prior. That and why were all she seemed capable of saying at this point. Ichimaru shrugged, and stalked forward. Rukia flinched, and whatever protests she had vanished from her mind. The serpentine powerhouse now sported a particularly vicious smile on his face, and the girl wondered if she had been taken out of the frying pan and placed into the fire. Jin, no, Rangiku said sternly. Oh, he replied playfully, but notably he stopped. Are ya sure ya should be talking like that to your captain? First of all, I'm your wife, and I'll talk to you however I want to, Rangiku started, her serious tone contrasting with his jovial one. Second, now that we're rescuing Rukia, we're not part of the Godi I-13 anymore, so you're not a captain. And third, I know what you're thinking, and I still say no, we are letting them live. Rukia glanced at the men on the ground and realized with a start that he had intended to silence them permanently. When they wake up, the other captains'll know that we were the ones who rescued Rukia-chan, Ichimaru argued. We kill em now, all they'll know is that someone rescued her, and they'll probably blame the Ryoka. It'll keep em guessing, make it easier for us to sneak Rukia-chan out. Perhaps, Rangiku admitted, apparently agreeing with the logic, but not the ethics, of his plan of action. But I don't think it's worth killing them over. He looked at his wife with a neutral smile on his face. Please, Ichimaru Teiko, Rukia interjected cautiously. I don't want anyone else to die because of me. While his head did not move, and she could not see his eyes, Rukia felt Ichimaru's gaze turn to her. She gulped, but held her ground. Finally, the man let out a single laugh. How can I argue with my two favorite women? "'Kay, we'll do it your way this time," he said as he gave a relenting shrug. "Next, let's get that collar off Rukia-chan and pick up Abarai-kun." "What? But he's dead. I felt his Ryotsu disappear." Rukia protested, afraid to hope. "He's not dead yet," Rangiku assured her as she knelt down to work on removing the Ryotsu sealing collar. "Yeah, he's just restin', look," the fox affirmed with an odd accent, which earned a very dirty look from his wife. As if to deliberately earn her ire further, he continued, "Remarkable bird, the Rukonga red, eh? Beautiful plumage." While Rangiku scolded her husband about inappropriately timed references to popular mortal culture, Rukia focused her senses to where she had last felt Renji's Ryotsu. She realized with surprised joy that while her old friend's Ryotsu was weak, it was still present. Relieved that Renji was still alive, she turned back to her unexpected rescuers and asked the question that was on the forefront of her thoughts. Why? What did they have to gain by helping her? They had no motive for saving her or her friends. Then again, 2 minutes ago she would have said the same of Zaraki. Last I checked, no one with Bankai was ever easy to kill, Ichimaru answered. Not that, Rukia shook her head with slight annoyance. I mean, why are you helping me? Rangiku glanced up at her husband, and decided to let him explain. He looked thoughtful, as if pondering how to put his reasons into words. Hey, Rangiku. The lieutenant of the 3rd Division looked up from her paperwork to see that her captain had returned to the office. Normally, she would be out on patrol looking for the Ryoka, but there were some forms that demanded her immediate attention. She planned to finish only the few most necessary ones before going back out on field duty. How goes the hunt for the Ryoka? She asked as she returned to her forms and continued to fill out the appropriate spaces. Haven't found him, he replied easily, and then veered off onto another topic. I've been thinking about something, and I wanna ask ya about it. What? Do ya really think Rukia-chan deserves to die? Rangiku froze, her pen hovering over the line that had yet to gain her signature. While she hated paperwork, the implication of Jin's question was not her preferred way out of it. You're thinking about helping the Ryoka rescue her, aren't you? Since it looks like ya already know the answer to your question, how about answerin' mine? She sighed, deciding to humor him for the moment. It was not as if he were suggesting anything illegal, yet. No, I don't think Kukaki Rukia deserves to die. Was that so hard to say? Okay, she was done with the humoring, it was time to get straight to the point. Jin, this is not the kind of mischief that'll get you a spanking from Yamamoto, she scolded. If you do anything to save Rukia, he'll kill you. He'll have to find us first. Us? She asked flatly with a raised eyebrow. What, did ya really think I'd do this adventure without ya? If I rescued Rukia-chan all by myself, then I'd have to leave ya, Fervor. And, while I do wanna save Rukia-chan, nothing's worth being separated from ya, Fervor. I promised that I would never leave ya, Rangiku. I'd really love your help, but if you're dead set against it, we'll stay. She sighed. Why are you so interested in saving her, anyway? Besides the fact that I like teasing her, and I don't like sad endings? I actually think this rescue can work. What makes you think that? This ain't the first time Soul Society has been attacked, we all know that. This ain't even the first time someone's broken into the Surya to save a prisoner. What's different about this invasion is the fact that outsiders are coming in to save a Shinigami, and some the higher officers are joining as well. And that's only after a few days of bargain in here. And I don't know about ya, but I kinda like the idea of being one of the few people to successfully rescue a prisoner from the Godai 13. Rangiku contemplated her husband's words silently. Jin, do you really believe that saving Rukia-san is the right thing to do? She finally asked softly. Well, ya know that I've always had a hard time with right and wrong, but I think I've got it this time. She looked at him critically. There's another reason, isn't there? Rangiku guessed. Yeah, got me, Jin admitted. There is. But I can't tell ya what. Rangiku blinked in surprise. It was not often that her husband kept information from her. Most of the time, it was classified information that was deemed captain's eyes only. Another instance that stuck more solidly in her mind was the fact that he had never told about his past before he had saved her from starvation. Whenever she had asked, his answer had always been the same: as far as I'm concerned, I didn't exist before the day I met ya. Whether the answer was flattery or covering up his past or both, there were still parts of Jin's life that remained a mystery to her. And most of the time, she respected his privacy enough that she let him keep his secrets. Trust me, it's a good reason, he continued. And maybe I'll tell ya what it is someday, but not now. She knew that Jin would not suggest something on this scale lightly. They both had a good life here in the Godi 13. If they rescued Rukia, then they would be forced to leave the 3rd Division, all the friends they had in the Siridi, and perhaps even have to run to the world of the living in order to survive. If he had a good enough reason that he was willing to ask her to go through all that, then it was indeed very important to him. Rangiku sighed again. She looked at the forms in front of her, and the pen in her hand, before tossing the latter over her shoulder in resignation. All right, if it matters that much to you, let's go save Rukia-san. I don't want to do this paperwork anyway. Cause you're my second favorite woman in Seoul society, Ichimaru finally answered simply. That's not an answer. Rukia protested. Yes it is. Jin, stop agitating her and help me get this off, Rangiku scolded as she fiddled with the clasp to Rukia's collar. The recently rogue captain calmly walked in front of them. Rukia held her breath and stiffened as she saw his hand rose up to her neck. She only exhaled and relaxed after Ichimaru had smoothly unlocked the collar, and let it fall to the ground. Rangiku glared at him. Show off, she muttered as she stood back up. He responded by turning the knob on his smile to Chiki. Okay, next on the list is picking up Abarai-kun, Ichimaru said out loud, and then grabbed Rukia by the back of her obi. The former prisoner yelped in surprise as she was lifted off the ground and tucked under his arm. Let's go. Sentaro stood watch at the window in his captain's office, and kept a nervous eye on the iconic hill at the geographic center of the Siridi. He knew that any minute now, Rukia's execution would begin. He also knew Yukatake had a plan to save the girl, but if he wanted it to succeed, he had better hurry up. Ready. Both third seats snapped towards their captain's voice, who had finally emerged from his chamber with his tools in hand. Has the execution started yet? Yukatake asked. No, sir. Sentaro answered. Good, the captain exhaled in relief. Then we may not be too late. Hanataro smiled reassuringly at Abarai Renji as he entered the last stages of the healing session. The latter's battle with Kukaki Byakuya had really done a number on him. The fact that Abarai was still alive spoke volumes of his resilience and Anohana's skills. I need to get moving, the patient groaned out. Hanataro's smile disappeared, and he used every bit of pitiful arm strength he had to keep the larger man on the ground. Fortunately, the patient was still wounded, so he did not have as much energy to resist his healer's insistence. Another factor in the 7th seat's favor was Rikaki's rush forward to help in making sure Abarai recovered correctly. Abarai-san, the mousy man from the 4th protested. You can't move just yet. Please let me finish up first. Even if Ichigo rescues Rukia, he's going to need help breaking her out of the Siridi, the now ex-lieutenant argued back. I'm healed enough to help him with that. I have to disagree with that. Hanataro corrected hurriedly. Yeah, I shouldn't argue with your healer, yeah no. The three men jerked their heads towards the new voice that had spoken. Their surprise at identifying the speaker as Captain Ichimaru was only augmented by what he was carrying under his arm. Or, perhaps it was more accurate to say who. Rukia. Rukia-san. Kukaki-sama. Renji. Are you alright? The girl in question cried from her rather undignified position. I'm fine, Abarai assured her. The difficulty he displayed in just raising his head to look at her was dwarfed only by his inability to understand what he was seeing. Jin, put her down, the Rangiku instructed, and Hanataro realized that this was the first time he had ever noticed the gorgeous woman last in a scene. It was indeed a strange day. Her other half obeyed without another word, and the tiny Shinigami immediately rushed to her old friend's side. Are you all right? Hanataro, is he going to recover? Rukia continued to ask. Definitely. I'm almost finished, he answered. Hey, you said I wasn't healed enough to fight, Renji protested. And that's still true, Hanataro riposted. Even though your wounds have been healed, you've still lost a lot of spiritual energy. Is he well enough for me to hit him for being an idiot? Rukia asked. Go right ahead, the healer permitted. Now, wait a minute ow. You idiot. And the score is now Rukia-chan's fist, 1, Aburai-kun's face, 0, Ichimaru quipped. What were you thinking, almost getting yourself killed like that? Rukia hollered. Rukia, you can beat him up later, Rangiku interrupted, preventing the smaller girl from continuing her scolding, and ignoring Renji's protest at the prospect of further injury. Right now, we need to focus on escaping. That's right. But, before we do anything else, Ichimaru agreed, and then turned to the 6th Division unseated officer, who might ya be? Rikaki, sir, of the 6th Division, the young man answered promptly as he stood at attention. Anyone know you're here? Ichimaru asked. No, sir. Then run along. If ya get back to your squad soon, they'll never know ya helped the enemies of the Godai 13. But I want to help. Rikaki protested. I've come this far, haven't I? If ya stay with us, ya might get killed. And even if ya don't, all you'll get is a life exilin', always lookin' over your shoulder, making sure that we don't get caught. Are ya ready to deal with that? The unseated officer hesitated for the briefest moment before declaring, for Renji-san, I am. Rikaki, the red-haired man groaned, don't. You've done enough for us. For that, I'll always be grateful. But please don't throw away your future for my sake. We won't think ill of you if you go back now. Renji-san, I insist. Rikaki persisted. Jews, as long as ya know what you're getting into, and don't get in our way, ya can come with us, Ichimaru agreed, and then attained a thoughtful look on his face. Yeah no, if we keep attracting helpers like this, it'll be more convenient for the rebels to stay in Soul Society and to have everyone else be exiled. Somehow, I doubt that idea would go over well with Yamamoto, Rangiku deadpanned. The captain commander let a subtle sneeze escape him. Either there was a beautiful woman talking about him, or he was coming down with a cold. Conscious of his age and appearance, Yamamoto made a note to have some health-boosting tea later, before focusing his thoughts on a more pressing matter. Kukaki Rukia and her escort were late. With the Ryoka invasion occurring, and with the goal of the intruders reportedly being to rescue Kukaki Rukia, the tardiness of the prisoner was a legitimate cause for concern. Perhaps it would have been prudent to assign a captain to oversee the prisoner's transfer from her cell to the execution site. He looked over to his lieutenant. Kojiro caught his meaning immediately. He acknowledged the silent order with a nod and set off to investigate what was delaying their arrival. Well, Jin, this was your idea, what should we do now? Rangiku asked. We'll need to find the rest of the Ryoka and let them know Rukia's been rescued. Findin' 'em's gonna be bit o' a problem, Jin said. Any y'all know where they might be? Kurosaka's under Sokioka Hill, Aburai answered as he stood up, now that Hanataro had finally finished healing him to his satisfaction. There's an underground training complex. I don't know about the rest of them, though. I think they're in the 4th Division's holding cells, Hanataro offered. It'll be easy to find Zaraki and his crew, just follow the big yellow riot suit, Rangiku commented. We find Kurosaka first, Aburai declared. Jin sent an inquisitive smile to the wounded warrior. He's the only one of the Ryoka still free, he explained. And he's the strongest and the most reckless of them. You're not the one to criticize people about being reckless, Rukia scolded. Shut up, Aburai snapped back before continuing. If he doesn't get the message that we've already got Rukia, he'll charge out to the Sokioku and get himself killed trying to take on all the captains at once. Definitely, Rukia agreed. "'Kay then, next stop is Secret Underground Training Center, Jin decided. Let's go. But how? Hanataro asked. Only you and Rangiku-san can flash step right now. Rangiku, Carry Rukia-chan and Hanataro-kun, the now ex-captain declared brightly. I'll take care of Abarai-kun and Rikaki-kun. 4 cries of protests went ignored as both Ichimaru lifted their unwilling passengers. Jin simply picked up Abarai and tossed him over one shoulder like a sack of persimmons, and held Rikaki likewise. Rangiku lifted Rukia bridal style in her arms, and allowed the bashful Hanataro to climb on her back and ride piggyback style, albeit only after she had given him a direct order to do so. Kojiro arrived at the bridge that connected Sokioku Hill and the Tower of Penitence, and that was where he discovered the bodies of the guards. After he scanned their Ryotsu levels and confirmed that they were thankfully still alive, he applied some healing Kido to one of them. After a moment, a groan announced his return to the world of the waking. What happened? Kojiro inquired as soon as the man was coherent. It was Ichimaru Teiko and Ichimaru Fukutaiko. They attacked us and took Kukaki Rukia with them. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed. See to your fellow guards, he instructed, and after his order was acknowledged, Kojiro cast a Tenteikara to grant him direct communication with Yamamoto. I found the guards unconscious. After waking them, they said that Ichimaru Teiko and Ichimaru Fukutaiko had taken Kukaki Rukia. Silence was the only reply at first, but the lieutenant could feel the anger burning off his captain's mind. Find them. Subdue them. If necessary, kill them. Bring Kukaki Rukia back. Yes, sir. The Tenteikara cut off, and Kojiro set forth to carry out his orders. We're at the bottom of Sokioku Hill now, Ichimaru announced as he stood still. Where's this secret underground training center of yours? It's right over there, Renji gestured over his shoulder, still facing the wrong way thanks to being slung across the captains. I can't see where you're pointing, the silver ex-captain complained. Then maybe you should put me down. The fox-like fighter complied. After satisfied that he was on his feet, Renji pointed out definitively and clearly which way their destination was, with more attitude than perhaps was necessary. Thanks. And then he was promptly yanked off his feet again by Ichimaru, and both of them flash-stepped to the entrance. It was only after all 6 of them reached the inside of the training room that Jin allowed the 2 former 6th Division members to stand by themselves again. Hello. Ichimaru called. Anyone home? No, come by later, a familiar feminine voice called back, caution laden in every word. You're Yuaki-san. It's Abarai Renji, the red-haired man announced. And I've brought some friends home. I think the friends brought you, Rangiku teased. Shut it, Renji growled. Ya should be grateful we decided to let ya tag along, Ichimaru said. If it weren't for the fact that Rukia-chan would cry if I left ya and Rikaki behind, I would've. What? Why would you want him and not me? Renji protested, gesturing to Hanataro. Cause he's the best healer here, Jin explained, that makes him more useful than ya right now. But I have Bankai. Can ya use it right now? I thought not. Well, this is a surprise, Yuaki spoke up again as she emerged from behind a promontory. Ichimaru-jin, come to help us. What's your angle? Right around then Renji's brain ceased to function, because while he remembered that the aforementioned woman was quite gorgeous, she was now stark naked. A moment later, his lungs ceased to function for a moment as well, due to one temperamental midget punching him in the solar plexus. Avert your eyes, you fool. Even though he knew it would be easier to simply obey her than to argue, he couldn't help but protest with a wheezing, why, aren't you mad at the other guys? Because Rikaki's passed out, Ichimaru-san is married. Yeah, no offense, but I think Ranjiku's prettier. Good answer, Buster, the wife smirked. No offense taken, the Onatarel woman brushed off casually. And Hanataro is being a gentleman, Rukia finished. Renji stared at the other conscious man, surprised that the mild-manner healer wasn't simply resorting to fainting like Rikaki had. Instead, Hanataro was politely averting his eyes, as if he were considered Yuaki's modesty more important than his own bashful inclinations. Why aren't you bothered by this? He demanded. Well, I am a healer, so I've examined Shinigami of both genders before, Hanataro explained matter-of-factly. When you've been physically examining people for that long, skin exposure doesn't really bother you. Renji gaped at the meek officer. Oh, the cat-like exhibitionist grinned mischievously, and started to walk towards Hanataro in a sultry manner. So this doesn't bother you at all? Since his gaze was averted, Hanataro did not see what this referred to, but the seductive tone in her voice was enough to superheat his face and make him back up a few steps while trying to stammer out some sort of coherent response. So it's the voice that gets you going, not the looks, she smirked. Yuriyuki. A new and clearly irritated voice hollered. Will you just put on some clothes? Okay, fine, she rolled her eyes and walked back the way she came. Some people are so uptight. From the same direction Yuriyuki had come, Ichigo appeared, fully clothed, with a hand beside his face, obviously meant to shield his view from any and all feminine nudity. So, did you do it? Renji asked. Yeah, Ichigo confirmed as he let his hand fall down to his side. Did what? Rukia questioned. Bankai, the human said, and then faced her, ignoring the shocked look on her face at his achievement. And I see you got yourself rescued, good job, I'm glad you finally decided to see reason. It's not like they gave me a choice, she protested, quickly getting over her surprise and stomping up to him. They were as tyrannical as you were. We're going to save you whether you like it or not. What kind of way is that to rescue someone? It's the way you save someone when that someone is too dumb to let herself be rescued willingly. Pass the popcorn, will ya, Rangiku? Ichimaru said. The bickering duo froze as they remembered their audience. Oh, yeah, who are you? Ichigo asked as he turned to the unfamiliar faces. This is Ichimaru Jin-san, and his wife Rangiku-san, the now former captain and lieutenant of the 3rd Division, Renji introduced. They're the ones who rescued Rukia. I think you already know Hanataro, and the guy on the ground over there is Rikaki. Thanks, Jin, Rangiku, Ichigo said, though he gave the pair a cautious look. Just tryin' to do the right thing, the former captain shrugged. Oh, really, Yuriyuki said skeptically as she returned properly clothed. I admit that I didn't know you that well when I was here, and I admit that things can change in 100 years, but I would have never have pegged you as the type of guy who would do something for something as noble as the right thing. Maybe I learned one thing too many from Shunsui, and now I have this irresistible urge to save damsels in distress, Ichimaru suggested. Rangiku snorted as she rolled her eyes. The golden-eyed noblewoman gave a skeptical but did not question him further. For now, she seemed willing to accept any help offered to the cause. Addressing motives could be saved until later. So, what's next? Hanataro asked hesitantly. Good question, Rangiku assented. We saved Rukia, but how are we going to get her out of Soul Society? We'll also have to find my friends, Ichigo put in. Your first priority should be getting Rukia-chan out, Ichimaru said. If she don't make it, then all our work is for nothing. I'm not leaving them behind, the teenager growled firmly. We're not going to, Yuriyuki assured him. But you're not going to be the one to rescue them this time. Ichigo, you take Rukia. I suggest going for the west gate, you're strong enough that you can lift the gate and let yourself out. I have a cape that will let you fly and get there faster. After you get out, go hide at Kyokaku's place until the rest of us show up. What about us? Renji asked. You take Hanataro and Rikaki out the same direction, but since Ichigo will be moving faster than the rest of you, you'll have to go the slow route, Yuriyuki instructed. Just do your best not to get caught. How do we find this Kyokaku person? Hanataro asked. Just find a place to hide in the first western district, Yuriyuki instructed. I'll come find you. Renji and Hanataro nodded. Rikaki only groaned as he returned to consciousness. What? He asked groggily. Just follow me, Renji told him, since he figured it would be easier to explain the whole situation later as opposed to repeating it all now. Okay, Rikaki accepted as he managed to stand on his own 2 feet. And you two, Yuriyuki finished, pointing at the Ichimaru family, will go with me to find the rest of the Ryoka and help them get out as well. We'll all meet up at the Shiba house. Got it, Rangiku said. Wait, Rukia interjected nervously, we're taking refuge with the Shiba clan. Is that going to be a problem? Yuriyuki asked. Her tone was deceptively casual, but there was an undercurrent of challenge within it. Ichigo raised an eyebrow in slight confusion, and looked to see if he could find any answers from the other Shinigami. Hanataro, Renji, and Rangiku all wore serious looks, and Rikaki seemed to be clueless about this topic, but Ichimaru still wore that same smile. No, Rukia finally answered. After he had finished his mental conversation with his lieutenant, Yamamoto turned to his immediate subordinates. Ichimaru Jin and Ichimaru Rangiku have defected to the Ryoka's side by seizing Kukaki Rukia. As of this moment, they are now our primary targets. Yamamoto Soteiko, Anohana spoke up. What is the status of the men who were escorting Rukia-san? Sasakaibe said they were injured, but not dead. May I inspect their condition personally? The captain commander nodded. Come, Isane, the chief healer commanded, and the 2 top seats of the 4th division departed. For the rest of you, find Ichimaru Jin, Ichimaru Rangiku, and Kukaki Rukia. Yamamoto ordered. If the former 2 resist, you are authorized to use deadly force. Dismissed. Yes, sir, came the general acknowledgement. As they departed, the old man kept a covert eye on his oldest student, Shunsui. He had noticed that the captain of the 8th division looked pleasantly surprised by the news of Kukaki Rukia's rescue. While Yamamoto did not want to think that the man he considered to be a son would betray him, his suspicious mind kept the idea there. Kojiro had told him a proverb from a Western man, one of the few pieces of advice from that culture Yamamoto considered worthy: trust, but verify. Chapter 5, Uprising. Now that the Rukia rescuers had a plan of action, they were ready to leave. Of course, with Kurosaki Ichigo, nothing can ever be that simple. Why aren't we leaving at the same time? Ichigo asked. Shouldn't we stick together, safety in numbers? You, Ichimaru Jin, and I are the only captain-class fighters here, Yuriuki explained. Right now, there could be up to 9 captains on top of Sokioku Hill. They probably know that Rukia is gone, so that means they'll be rushing off to find her. Since we're close to the hill, if one captain finds us this soon, it'll be easy to call the others to our location. If the Ichimaris and I leave first, that attention will be drawn onto us, and should allow the rest of you to escape, assuming you move quickly and quietly. Not sure I like Bane bait, Jin commented. Well, as you pointed out earlier, if Rukia doesn't get out, then the whole operation is a failure, the golden-eyed woman replied. So if you've got a better plan, let me hear it. Yeah, he grinned. Yeah, go out first. We wait for the other captains to kill Ya, and then Rangiku and I will stab em in the back when their guard's down. No, both Yuriuki and Rangiku flatly replied, and then the latter admonished, don't make jokes like that, the kids will think you're actually serious. Who are you calling kids? Renji growled. It's only to be expected when you act so childish, Rukia sniped. Hey, she meant you, too, he shot back. As fun as it is to watch you all bicker, you need to save it for later, Yuriuki interrupted. Now that we've all agreed on my plan, let's move. See the rest of you on the outside. She flash-stepped away, to be followed by Jin and Rangiku. Let's hope Anohana Teiko ain't at the 4th right now, any? Jin commented after they were outside. Hopefully, even if she is, we'll be in and out faster than she can respond to our break-in, the Flash Goddess responded. Yuriuki. At the same moment the shout registered, a black and white blur raced to tackle the former captain. Remarkably, Yuriuki not only managed to sidestep the attack, she then pounced on her attacker in return. Jin caught only a glimpse of Soifone struggling with her old mentor before the force of the impact sent the both of them flying into a forested area which bordered Sokioku Hill. I guess we're on our own, Jin noted mildly as he watched the 2 speed specialists disappear into the woodlands. The couple's attention was drawn to the side once more as they heard a familiar huffing and puffing. Wait. Up, the large lieutenant of the 2nd panted, and then stopped in terror as he noticed the defecting pair looking at him. Do ya really wanna fight us? Jin asked in amusement. Or do ya wanna go help out your captain? Obviously preferring any 2-on-1 odds to be in his favor, Omada disappeared in a buzz of shunpo to catch up with his commanding officer. "K, now with that out of the way, let's go arrange a prison break." Yukatake and his 3rd seats were rushing through the corridors of the Siratii towards Sokioku Hill when 2 figures flash-stepped in front of them. The captain's heart almost failed him until he realized that it was Kiraku and his lieutenant. "Kiraku," Yukatake exclaimed in surprise. "What's wrong?" "There's been a change of plans," his old friend smiled. "We won't need to destroy the Sokyoku after all." "Did the Central 46 change their minds?" Sentaro asked incredulously. "Of course not," Kiraku chuckled. "Jin and Ranjiku-chan saved Rukia-chan." The third seats gaped in an identical manner. "They did? Why?" Yukatake asked, surprise clear in his voice as well. "Don't know yet," the captain of the 8th replied. "But now that they've rescued her, we do have the option of backing out." "What do you mean?" Nanao inquired. "Well, technically we still haven't broken the law yet," Kiraku pointed out. "If anyone here wants to keep it that way, we can just let Rukia-chan and her rescuers escape on their own." Yukatake considered the proposition only briefly. "No," he said at last. "I want to make sure that Rukia lives, and I will do everything I can to ensure that end." "Figured you'd say that," Kiraku smiled. "All right, since Rukia-chan's safe right now, maybe we should find the rest of the Ryoka and let them know." "You're right," Yukatake agreed, "let's go." "Excuse me, Yukatake Teiko," Nanao said. "But what are you going to do with that?" The captain looked down at the tools he had intended to destroy the Sokyoku with. "I suppose we should make a brief stop by my barracks first," Yukatake suggested sheepishly. "An artifact like this should not be left in the streets." "Okay, I think we've waited long enough," Ichigo declared. "Let's go." "Are you sure we allowed them enough time?" Hanataro asked hesitantly. "I mean, it's only been a couple minutes." "I'm with Kurosaki on this one," Renji said. "I think it's time to move out." "Didn't you hear Yoriyuki?" Rukia demanded. "She said we needed to wait." "She never mentioned for how long," Ichigo retorted. "The reason they went first was so that the other captains would go after them instead of us." As if on cue, they felt the ryotsu of a pair of captain-class fighters engage in combat. "There, mission accomplished, now let's go," Ichigo announced, and before anyone could stop him, he grabbed Rukia's arm and flash-stepped to the clearing directly above the large cave. "Wow, leaving without saying goodbye," Renji remarked sarcastically. Exactly 1 second after he had done so, Ichigo reappeared, and brought him up to the surface in a similar manner as he had Rukia. 2 more uses of Shunpo delivered Hanataro and Rikaki to the same place as the ruffled Renji and Rukia. "I figured it would be faster for you to let me bring you up here than let you climb the ladder," Ichigo explained belatedly. "Warn a guy next time," Renji grumbled. "See you guys later, take care of yourselves," Ichigo said as he yanked Rukia off her feet and held her under one arm. "Is there a single man who knows how to hold a lady properly?" the girl protested hotly as she squirmed in his grip. "It's easier to carry you like this," Ichigo replied casually. "And stop wriggling or I'll drop you." "When I saw Ichimaru-jin and Ichimaru Ranjiku depart alone, I knew that Rukia had to be with you." The troop froze as they heard a familiar monotone voice. All turned to find Captain Kukaki standing a few yards off, watching them like a hawk sighting mice. "Kukaki Byakuya," Ichigo grinned menacingly. He set Rukia back on her feet, and then took off the token. As he tossed it to Renji, he told him, "Take this and get the others out of here." "What are you doing?" Rukia hissed. "I have a score to settle with this guy, and you'll need a distraction in order to get away," Ichigo explained as he brought Zanjutsu forward into a standard position. "You can't fight him," she protested. "Don't you remember what happened the last time you fought him? I don't care if you say you've learned Bankai, you can't win against him." "Rukia, shut up and let Renji rescue you," Ichigo ordered without looking at her. His casual dismissal of her words sent Rukia into a furious speechlessness as she tried to find the proper way to convince the substitute from not taking an action she deemed suicidal. "You sure you got this?" Renji took advantage of his old friend's silence to confirm Ichigo's idea while he donned the flight cloak. Ichigo nodded. "All right," the ex-lieutenant said, and scooped up Rukia in his arms. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. "What?" Renji asked. "I thought you wanted a person who could hold a lady properly." "Ichigo can't win against Nii-sama. He stands a better chance against him than the rest of us do," the street fighter replied, and then told the other two men, "Hold on tight." Rikaki and Hanataro obeyed by clinging tightly to Renji's arms, and with a concentration of Ryotsu, the red-haired man launched into the air. "Did Rukia say you claimed to have attained Bankai?" the Kukaki opposing Ichigo asked calmly, but with a healthy seasoning of disdain. "Well, I was hoping to keep it a surprise, but she just had to spoil it," Ichigo grinned ferociously. "Ridiculous," Byakuya dismissed. "A mere human like you could not possibly attain the ultimate release of a Zanpakuto. Especially not in 2 days. You know, Kukaki Byakuya," Ichigo started. "Ever since the night Rukia gave me her powers, I've been doing stuff you Shinigami say is impossible. I've beaten hollows, detected spirit ribbons, fought off Aminos Grande, defeated your lieutenant, got Shinigami powers of my own, broke into Soul Society, beat your lieutenant again, and even fought Kenpeki. What makes you think that a little something like the impossible is going to stop me now?" The noble lord simply narrowed his eyes ever so slightly, a sign that anyone who knew him would recognize as the prelude to an execution. So iPhone looked on smugly as her Onmitsukido appeared out of their hiding places and surrounded Yoriyuki. She ignored the lieutenant who had just arrived behind her, panting in a shameful manner. The stealth commander's confidence evaporated as she watched with shocked eyes as her former commander disabled all of the Onmitsukido in the amount of time it took for her afterimage to dissipate, until she and Omida were the only ones left. "Incredible," the broad man gasped. "She took them all out by herself. They're barely more than statues compared to her. Captain, she's really whoa." His comment was cut off as he managed to sidestep Yoriyuki's strike by a hair's breadth. "Ha ha." Omida laughed triumphantly. "You may be able to beat the rest of those guys, but I'm the lieutenant of this division. I'm not a pushover like those OOF." Once again, his declarations were cut short, this time by the former captain of the 2nd Division successfully knocking him out in a single blow. "You're slower than your father was," the Flash Goddess noted, and then turned to her old student. "And while it's true that I have abandoned the title of Corps Commander, I don't remember abandoning my other name." "There they are," Kiraku said out loud to the others as he picked up the familiar Ryotsu of one of the humans. "Long time no see, Sato-san," he greeted amiably upon landing in front of the Ryoka. The teenagers widened his eyes in fear as he recognized the captain. Without a moment's hesitation, he leapt in front of the others and readied his fist. It did not seem to matter to him that he could not summon his armored form at the moment, due to him still recovering from his previous encounter with this flamboyant yet dangerous man. "Whoa, calm down, there, Sato-san," Kiraku chuckled easily. "We're not here to fight." The dark-skinned human stopped, and gave the captain a skeptical look. "We just wanted to tell you that Rukia has already been rescued," Yukatake explained as he landed next to his friend. "What?" Sato rumbled in surprise. "Kurosaki-kun did it," a pretty girl asked excitedly. "It wasn't Kurosaki Ichigo," Nanao reported as she joined the growing crowd of Shinigami confronting the Ryoka, Sentaro, and Kian right behind her. "It was the work of one of the captains and his lieutenant. Who would have guessed that Jin, of all people, would take to rescuing her?" Kiraku chuckled. "Ichimaru Teiko," said the Shinigami helping the Ryoka, his jaw dropping in shock. "Yep. Where's Kurosaki, then?" asked another one of the Ryoka, a glasses-wearing young man who looked like he could have been Nanao's brother. What was even more interesting was the fact that Kiraku could detect faint Quincy Ryotsu on him. This must have been the one who battled Kurotsuki. "I last saw him at the Shrine of Penitence, when Yoriyuki had just dragged him off," Jushiro answered. "Are you sure that Kukaki-san is safe with this Ichimaru person?" the maybe Quincy asked suspiciously. The 8th and 13th Division members looked at each other nervously. "I'm not sure safe is the most accurate word for it," Nanao answered cautiously. "However, since Rangiku-san is with him, he'll behave for her sake." "Who's she?" the girl asked. "His wife," Kiraku answered, and then continued, "Now, the next thing you all should do is escape." "But what about Ichigo? And shouldn't we try to find Ichimaru and Rukia-san?" Sato asked. "Jin was my lieutenant, so I know him better than most, and I know that he's a smart guy. He'll be able to get Rukia-chan out," Kiraku assured him. "As for Ichigo, well, if he has Shiho and Yoriyuki with him, he'll definitely be fine." But right now, we need to focus on escaping ourselves, Yucatec said. So please, let us help you. The Ryoka gave each other brief glances before nodding. Glad to have you with us, Kiraku smiled. Now, quick question, what are your names? Introductions were exchanged on both sides. Once this was accomplished, the troop turned to leave, only to find a new figure blocking their path. Bent and wizened though he may appear, even those who had never met him could recognize the clear menace emanating from the form of Yamamoto Genri Yusai Shijikuni. Shunsui, Jushiro, the oldest captain in the Godi I-13 said. I assume that since you have Ryoka and company, you are taking them to a cell to have them interrogated. The two captains winced. They knew that it would take more than Shinigami uniforms to sneak humans in a Quincy past Yamamoto. And they also recognized the implications of Yamamoto's statement. The old man was giving them a chance to accept that explanation, and to continue being captains of the Godi I-13, despite the fact that Yamamoto certainly knew that they were thinking of aiding the Ryoka. It isn't, Yucatec confessed. He was not going to lie to his teacher, especially when it would not be believed. Ichimaru's betrayal was a disappointment, as I expected better of an officer who had trained under you, Kiraku Teiko, Yamamoto growled. But it seems that they learned how to stoop to such treason from your example. The order to execute Rukia-chan is wrong, Yucatec persisted. She may have given powers to a human, but that is not a crime warranting execution. Nanao-chan, Kiraku murmured. Take everyone out of here. You don't want to stick around for what's going to happen next. She almost protested, as she wished to stay by her captain's side, but Nanao knew better. With Kiraku and Yucatec holding off Yamamoto, she would be the best defense the Ryoka had against any other Shinigami who showed up. So instead she only nodded mutely, and gestured for the rest of the group to follow her. Yamamoto noted the departure of the lesser powerful fighters, but to the relief of his old students, the captain commander chose not to pursue. Kiraku and Yucatec knew that the best they could do against their old teacher was delay him long enough for the others to escape. Hinamori was personally leading a patrol composed of some of the upper officers of the 5th Division near Sokioku Hill, but so far, they had no luck in finding the Ryoka. There was another path coming up on the left, and just as they were about to go straight past it, another group of Shinigami appeared from that direction. Hinamori stopped in surprise, and the rest of the patrol followed suit. The lieutenant blinked in surprise as she recognized the leaders of the new arrivals. Nanao-san. Hinamori asked. What are you doing here? With Kian-san and Sentaro-san. The other woman opened her mouth to respond, but before any words emerged, all of them were blasted off their feet by an enormous wave of molten ryotsu. The members of the patrol fell to their knees, a couple of them were almost unconscious due to the sheer amount of spiritual pressure. Hinamori could not tell the status of Nanao's company, as she was focused on the condition of her subordinates. What is this? One of the officers gasped. Hinamori could feel Tabayam trembling inside of her. While the amount of ryotsu should be a dead giveaway unto itself as to the identity of the bearer, the lieutenant's Zanpakuto, being a fire-type sword, could identify of the source of the power quicker than the other Shinigami could. Ryujinjaka had been unleashed. Yamamoto Soteiko has engaged in combat, Hinamori managed to tell her subordinates. What kind of enemy could force the captain commander to release his sword? Who cares? We need to get away from here. Everybody that can still walk will drag anyone who can't, Hinamori ordered, and did her best to raise her own ryotsu in order to shield her squad mates from the captain commander's spiritual pressure, but it was like trying to extinguish a firestorm with a bucket. She was glad they were not any closer to wherever Yamamoto was, otherwise they would all probably be unconscious or dead. Being so preoccupied, she failed to notice Nanao and company slipping quietly away. I guess Kenpei's already been through here, Jin idly commented. What tipped you off first, the rising cloud of smoke, or the scattered heaps of injured Shinigami? Ranjika remarked dryly. Excuse me, her husband called to one of the officers, a blond man with glasses and an imperial attitude about him. Yes, Ichimaru Teiko, the officer asked, weariness clear in his voice. And judging by his unconcerned demeanor at their presence, he had yet to get the memo as to their change of allegiance. What happened to the Ryoka prisoners? Jin asked. Zaraki and some of his crazies crashed in here and broke them out, he answered. We've managed to clean up most of the damage, but with all the injuries caused by the invasion, we're stretched to our limits. We're lucky no one's been killed. Well, no one except Aizen Teiko, of course. The officer gave Jin a nervous glance as he said that. Okay, this was getting ridiculous. Why did everyone think he had killed Aizen? Still, that was not important, so the silver man asked, "Yeah, know where they went?" "How should I know?" the healer asked in irritation, but then remembered his place and quickly bowed to the superior officers. "I apologize for my rudeness, Ichimaru Teiko. The day's stress has made me forget my manners." "No big deal," Jin waved off. "Thanks for the info. I'm glad to be of service." The blonde officer bowed again as the Ichimaris left. "Well, this means that finding the Ryoka is gonna be easier," Jin said as they left the 4th Division. "So, where's that big yellow Ryotsu?" "Well, we last felt it in that direction," Rangiku pointed. "I don't feel him fighting anymore though." "Hopefully, that just means he's taking a break after a good fight," he commented. Rangiku nodded in agreement. "Still, we should head over that way, just to be sure." Jin returned the nod, and they started flash-stepping over the walls of the Siritii. They had only been traveling a couple minutes when an icy voice stopped them in their tracks. "Ichimaru." The speaker did not need to specify which. Rangiku had snapped her hand down to Hanko the instant she heard the person call their name and quickly pivoted towards the new arrival. Jin's response was more casual, as he merely turned to face their interceptor, his smile on standard and his arms across his chest in the appearance of casualness. But his right hand hovered near Shinso. Hitsugaya Toshiro had his arms folded across his chest, disapproval clear in his posture, though one would be hard-pressed to detect it in his face. Just behind and to his right was Kira Izuru, though his own disappointment was much more apparent. "Hitsugaya Teiko." "Izuru." Jin greeted amiably. "Fancy running into ya here." "I don't know why you are doing this, and I don't care," Hitsugaya said. "Surrender. If ya really wanna give up without a fight, that's fine with me," the fox replied cheekily. "Ichimaru," Hitsugaya ignored the taunt. "I am only going to warn you once more, surrender now or I will kill you." "Oh, Kman," Jin said. "Doncha wanna join the revolution and help rescue Rukia-chan? Or if ya don't wanna leave the Godii 13, ya can just let us go and pretend we never ran into each other. For ol time's sake." "I cannot allow that," the 10th Division captain replied, and reached for his Zanpakuto. "Ichimaru Jin and Ichimaru Rangiku, I am putting you both under arrest for treason against Soul Society." Jin's hand dropped to his wakaizushi, and he ordered to his wife as he took a defensive stance, "Rangiku, go on without me. I'll take care o Hitsugaya." She did not argue, as the lieutenant knew that she would be useless in a captain-on-captain fight. "Be careful," she cautioned quietly, and then flash-stepped away. "Kira," Hitsugaya commanded to his lieutenant without removing his eyes from his opponent. "Yes, sir," he acknowledged, and took off in pursuit of Rangiku. With both lieutenants out of the way, the captains now focused on each other. Hitsugaya gripped the hilt of Hirin Meru, while Jin was ready to strike out with Shinso. They were still for a few moments, each duelist daring the opponent to make the first move. "Reign over the frosted heavens, Hirin Meru. Shoot to kill, Shinso." Blue Dragon collided with Silver Snake, and the battle between two prodigies began. Anohana dismissed her last patient with a nod of her head. As she had expected and hoped, none of Rukia's guards had needed any serious healing. They would have a headache for the next day or so, but they would be fine. Satisfied that she was finished with her work, the captain got to her feet and softly commanded her lieutenant to follow her. "Where are we going?" Isane asked. "On an investigation," Anohana answered. "Investigation. Hado number 4, Byakurai." Rangiku jumped to avoid the spell that had been fired at her and drew her sword, facing the other lieutenant who had been chasing her. "Rangiku-san," Kira said to her, his sword already drawn and ready to attack. "I don't want to hurt you, so please, surrender quietly." Considering how execution-happy the Central 46 seemed to be lately, "I'll pass," she answered. "Why are you trying to rescue Kukaki Rukia?" Jin thought it was the right thing to do. His already morose face dropped even further. That's the only reason. When Jin does something because he feels it's right, instead of just because it's what he wants to do, Rangiku explained. I know for certain that it's the right thing to do. Now let me ask you this, Kira, why are you so sure that Rukia-san needs to die? Just as you will follow your captain, I must follow mine, he replied. I'm not following him because he is my captain, I am standing by him because he is my husband. Kira sighed. I'm sorry, Rangiku-san, he said, meaning every word of it. But I must obey orders. Raise your head, Wabisuk. Third seat. Kira walked through the hallways of the 3rd Division, a stack of papers under his right arm. While the captain and lieutenant did just enough paperwork to make sure that Yamamoto did not separate them, a good portion of it still had to be completed by some of the lower-ranking officers. Still, considering that Kira had to do all the paperwork for the 3rd before Ichimaru came, it was actually less bureaucracy than he once had to perform. Izuru. The blonde Shinigami stopped and turned toward the familiar voice of his captain. Next to Ichimaru was the newly promoted captain of the 10th Division. Hitsugaya Toshiro, if Kira's memory was correct. Yes sir. Kira asked, what do you need? Hitsugaya Teiko wants to talk to Ya, Ichimaru explained. How may I be of service, sir? Kira asked the white-haired captain. I need a lieutenant, Hitsugaya informed him without preamble, and out of the potential candidates, I believe you to be the best choice. Kira almost dropped his stack of paperwork in shock. I'm honored, sir, he said, feeling a mixture of excitement and dread. Do you accept? Hitsugaya asked. May I have some time to think it over? Kira hesitantly requested. The shorter captain nodded, I'll give you a few days. With that said, he departed. Congrats, Izuru, Ichimaru grinned. Yeah, I get to be a vice captain. I'm not sure if I want to accept it, Kira admitted. Oh? How come? While it's an honor to be offered a position as a lieutenant, Kira explained, it would also mean leaving the 3rd. That's all you're worried about? If ya want that seat, ya can take it, it ain't like we're never gonna run into each other. I suppose so, but while I love the 3rd, no one's ever refused the position of lieutenant before. First time for everything. Are you trying to convince me to stay, Ichimaru Teiko? I ain't trying to tell ya nothing. Hitsugaya Teiko asked you, not me. If ya wanna be lieutenant, then go with Hitsugaya. If ya don't wanna, then don't. That simple. Kira exhaled. Thank you, Ichimaru Teiko, he bowed in gratitude. May I be excused? I have some paperwork to complete. Yeah, go ahead, Ichimaru waved him off. If it were any other scenario, Jin would be having fun. Actually, he still was having a good time. He just wished that his fight with Hitsugaya could have come when Rukia's life was not at stake. But he decided to enjoy the moment. While most people avoided Hitsugaya, the Silver Captain was one of the few individuals not put off by the young man's icy aura. Though it was far from friendship or even amiable feelings, Jin felt that he had better understanding of the youngest captain than most other people, except of course Hinamori. So while Jin found it a little sad that he had to fight Hitsugaya like this, he was also excited. For purposes of keeping the Siriti intact, captains were not allowed to release their swords except in permitted areas. And Bankai? Forget it. Jin thought that the bright spot in this whole duel was that he finally could get a feel for how the white-haired boy fought. As Jin would strike with Shinso, Hitsugaya would counter with Hire and Meru. When the 10th captain assaulted with his dragons, the 3rd captain would parry with his serpent. And just to make things interesting, Jin decided to talk with the kid. He knew that he would not be able to convince the rule-abiding captain to help him out, but that did not mean they could not have a friendly little chat while they fought. So, all the Central 46 gotta do is slam their gavels and poor lil Rukia-chan is killed off, he said conversationally. Now how is that fair? I didn't know you had taken an interest in ethics, Hitsugaya remarked dryly as he parried a stab from Shinso. It's not a regular habit, but this was a special case, Jin admitted. He stabbed forward again repeatedly, keeping up the assault and not letting his opponent have a chance to counter-attack. Ichimaru, "We have our orders," was the reply as the cold young man batted aside each thrust and managed to keep his defense solid. "Orders, huh? Who decides which orders are right or wrong?" the fox asked, and pushed forward through a potential opening. His thrust was avoided as Hichugaya leapt into the air, and twisted upside down so that his blade would come swinging at his enemy. Jin parried the attack and extended Shinso forward. Hichugaya twisted to the side and landed on his feet, letting loose another ice dragon as he did so. Jin used Shunpo to avoid the attack, and appeared several meters to his opponent's left. He pointed Shinso to his right as he felt the dragon turn and charge his new location. The frozen creature collided with the force of his Ryutsu focused into his Zanpakuto, and shattered into thousands of shards of ice. To nobody's surprise, Hichugaya flash-stepped behind him with his Notaki raised above his head and ready to cleave the fox in two. The rogue Shinigami felt his opponent prepare to attack from behind, and responded by taking a single step of Shunpo forward. He entered Hichugaya's vision once again about 50 feet away facing him. Shinso pointed towards him, but she did not strike out just yet. "We must obey our orders if balance is to be kept," Hichugaya said, and tellingly did not release another attack just yet. "If we don't perform our duties, the world will descend into chaos." "Oh, Kmin, don't tell me killin' Rukia-chan will help the universe." "Yeah, no, just like I do that what she did ain't deservin' o' an execution." "Perhaps not, but that is not for us to question. If the captains decide to disobey, then the lower ranks will as well. And when there is upheaval in soul society, who will be left to perform Kenso on whole souls, or to purify hollows? Yat already got upheaval when Kurosaki Ichigo and his friends barged in here," Jin pointed out. "They would have been dealt with eventually." "Are ya sure about that?" "For argument's sake, Ichimaru, what will saving Kukaki accomplish? The Central 46 has ordered her death. Even if the Ryoka manage to prevent her from dying today, more Shinigami will be sent after her, even if Yamamoto has to carry out the sentence personally. We'll hide, of course." "Where?" Now, I can't go and tell Yat all my secrets, now can I?" Shinso took that statement as her cue to strike at her prey once more. Renji had to admit, flying was awesome. He was moving at velocities that exceeded his own Shunpo speed, and with the same amount of energy that it took to walk. As he and his passengers flew over the Siridi, the wind rushing by them, the first-time flyer wondered if Yoriyuki would let him keep the cloak after they had escaped. "How much further is it?" Hanataro yelled over the noise of air rushing by them. Before Renji could reply, he felt a burst of Ryutsu shoot towards them. He tried to evade, but a streak of light told him that a Byakurai spell had succeeded in lighting the Tentoken on fire. "Hantaro!" Renji yelled, "Put out that fire!" Before the other man could act upon his instruction, another low-level lightning spell buzzed by them, somehow not hitting any of the four yet igniting another portion of the cloth. A third strike not only hit the cloak, but also proceeded to cut off a sizable corner of the Tentoken. Either they were very lucky, or their attacker was very good. Even though Hanataro had managed to put out the flames with a spell, the damage already done to the fabric had decreased their flight effectiveness. Renji knew that if they were going to meet up with the ground anyway, they might as well do so in a smooth and less painful manner. As the rescuers' altitude began to decrease, Renji tried to seek out their attacker. A flash of movement caught his eye, and he finally saw their pursuer. He could not make out the details from the distance, but the white coat on top of a black shiakusho was enough to make his blood go cold. Renji cursed to himself as he realized that a captain was now hot on their tail, and that their odds for escape had now plummeted into the very slim range. He hadn't completely recovered from his last bout with the captain. He took another look, to see if he could identify which captain it was. His eyes could make out a head of white hair, but even as Renji mentally went through the list of captains, he was unable to come up with a match. Yukatake would fit in terms of hair color, but the Haori of their pursuer did not have sleeves. He stopped his internal inquiry of trying to identify their pursuer, and focused on making it down in one piece. "Everyone brace for impact!" Renji yelled as they approached the ground. Their landing was actually softer than he had feared. He had to brace himself by going down to one knee, and his two male passengers were sent on a couple of rolls, but they could still run, and that was what mattered. "We need to go now." Renji barked to his comrades as he got to his feet and started running past Rikaki and Hanataro, trusting them to get up and follow after him as soon as they could. His face slammed into what felt like a brick wall. Since he was holding Rukia in front of him, she also got an unfortunate bump on her head by the impact of the invisible barrier that had magically appeared in front of them. Belatedly, Renji realized that someone had put up a Danku spell to cut off their escape. The former lieutenant turned around on his feet to look the opposite direction, and saw their pursuer walking calmly towards them, his Zanpakuto already drawn and released in the form of a rapier with the tip pointed at the ground. It was that moment when Renji realized two things. First, the white apparel was not a captain's Haori, as he had first thought, but instead a Jinbeiori. Second, Renji saw that their pursuer was Sasakaibe Kojiro, the lieutenant of the 1st Division. For the first time, Renji wondered how strong this man was. While facing a lieutenant was far better than a captain, Renji knew that he had not recovered enough Ryotsu to challenge any rank above 5th seat. He had no idea about the capabilities of the 1st Division's lieutenant, but if he was able to cast an 80s level spell without incantation and fire off Byakurai with such precision, that meant he was going to be a tough customer, especially in Renji's weakened state. "I don't like to fight, and I would normally ask that you all surrender quietly," the older man said. "But I don't think you are willing to simply lay down your arms and hand over the prisoner, are you, Aburai-san? You'll have to go over my dead body to get to her," the rogue lieutenant snarled as he set Rukia down. Then he drew his own Zanpakuto and charged forward. "Hell, Zabumaru!" He swung his sword, and felt the dual spirit within roar with anticipation as they extended towards their prey. Sasakaibe batted Renji's attack to the side, instead of a straightforward block. That was when Renji remembered this fighter's fondness for Western culture. The man's Zanpakuto was not like a katana. Instead of power and raw cutting ability, the rapier focused instead on agility and precise stabs. As Renji considered his tactical options, his opponent was already taking action, but not in the way he had hoped. Sigh. The invisible power behind the lieutenant's Kido snapped out and forced Renji's arms behind him, and then sent him face down on the ground. He panicked for a moment at his immobility, before seeing that Sasakaibe had turned his back and was now focusing on the rest of the troop. While Renji was confident he could break free from the low-level spell, even one cast by a vice-captain, it would take him a minute of struggle, and a lot could happen in that minute. Both Hanataro and Rikaki drew their swords on the lieutenant, placing themselves between him and their ward. "Hanataro, when I charge, you run," Rikaki said, and his tone left no room for argument. Seeing as they had little time to debate the matter, Hanataro nodded quickly, and grasped Rukia's hand in preparation. With a loud battle cry, the young man from the 6th Division charged with his sword held high. Sasakaibe deftly sidestepped the attack as the young man's blade dropped down, and lightly shoved Rikaki. He was slammed into the stone wall by the force, and his wind knocked out of him briefly. Shitosu Sansen. An outline of a golden triangle formed and shot forward to pin Rikaki to the wall. Hanataro and Rukia had not made it far when Sasakaibe turned his attention towards them. A single use of Shunpo put him directly in front of them and stopped them in their tracks. "Yield," he ordered simply. The healer gulped and shook his head in nervous defiance as he drew his Zanpakuto and held it in front of him. Rakuya Koro. 6 beams of light slammed into Hanataro's waist and paralyzed him. Sasakaibe was just about to reach for the recently freed prisoner when he felt his first spell being broken. Renji, while still injured and not having fully recovered from his battle with Captain Kukaki, still had enough Ryotsu in him that he managed to break the Bakudo holding him. Not even allowing himself to catch his breath, the Rukonga warrior charged forward in blind fury and whipped Zabumaru between his friend and his enemy. Without any discernible concern in his features at this assault, the lieutenant stepped back to avoid the attack, and faced his first opponent once more. "Run, Rukia!" Renji roared as he swung his Zanpakuto again. The girl hesitated, unwilling to leave her childhood friend when it might mean his death. Rakuya Koro. Not wishing to be paralyzed by a Bakudo spell again, Renji ducked and rolled out of the way of the incoming rods. His grin at avoiding the binding attempt fell as he saw that he was not the intended target. Rukia was now unable to run even if she wanted to, for there were 6 golden beams holding her in place. Renji cursed. The only way to get her out now was to beat Sasakaibe, and he had to admit, he did not like his chances. But he raised his sword anyway, and Zabumaru flew to attack their target. Sasakaibe disappeared just as the blade was about to reach him. Renji's eyes widened, and before he could react, his opponent appeared in front of him and pierced him in the exact spot where his left arm met his shoulder. Renji hissed in pain as he felt the blade penetrate through his left socket, and clumsily retaliated by swinging Zabumaru. However, since the sword was still extended, he could not gather enough energy to use it properly, so it was a simple matter for Sasakaibe to withdraw his own Zanpakuto, which brought another gasp of pain from Renji, and bat the clumsy attack aside. The fencer then used his free hand to grab Renji's right wrist in a surprisingly strong grip, and followed up by stabbing him in the solar plexus. "I admire the loyalty you have for your friend," the golden-eyed man said. "But if you continue like this, you will only succeed in killing yourself. Please yield and let Hanataro treat your wounds." "If I give up on saving Rukia while I still breathe," Renji coughed up blood, "I might as well be dead." Sasakaibe gave him a considering look for a moment. Then he exhaled through his nose, and nodded once, as if he understood his opponent's reasons. "Very well," the lieutenant said. "Then I suppose the only thing I can do for you is to allow you to die with the knowledge that you did your best to protect Kukaki Rukia." He then pulled his Zanpakuto out of Renji, and aimed it at his heart. "Stop. Please." Rukia's horrified scream made Sasakaibe hesitate for a moment. He turned his head towards the paralyzed girl and told her with no small amount of sympathy in his voice, "I would advise you to close your eyes for this, Rukia-san." "Please don't kill him," she begged. "To kill him now would be the kindest option available to me," he replied. "I have been ordered to recover the prisoner and bring in those who aided in her escape. If I spare Aburai-san, he will be tried and sentenced by the Central 46. Think about this, Rukia-san. If the Central 46 would execute you, a noble from the Kukaki clan for a relatively minor crime, what do you think they'd do to your friend?" The girl paled. "The kind and honorable action," the lieutenant finished, "is to end his life here in battle, where he can die with dignity defending you." Sasakaibe turned back to his beaten yet unbroken opponent, and prepared to make that final stroke. "Renji." Isane nervously followed her captain as they approached the outer gates of the Central 46's offices. "No guards are here," Anohana noted out loud. The lieutenant looked around and realized with a start that she was right. With such important leaders such as the Central 46, there were always a contingent of guards and sentries to ensure their safety. But now, the gates were eerily absent of any protective measures. They crossed the bridge leading to the inner sanctum's door. "Anohana Teiko requests an audience with the Central 46, the lead healer called out formally. The only response was the activation of the emergency defense system. "Now what?" Isane asked. Anohana did not reply for a moment. Then she raised her right hand, and declared, "Byakurai." The silver-haired girl gave a horrified gasp as she witnessed her captain cut down the door which prevented their entrance. Breaking and entering into the offices of the Central 46 was a capital offense. While Isane doubted that there was anyone who had the courage to execute Anohana, maybe Yamamoto, maybe, there was still the principle of the matter. Before she could voice any protests, her elder spoke again, "The alarm is not sounding." Isane's feeling of eeriness amplified as she realized that something not right was occurring. She followed her captain down the long staircase, and they finally came upon the chambers of the Central 46. Isane gasped in horror at the sight that greeted them, and Anohana looked on in controlled shock. Blood greeted their eyes. There was not a soul left alive in that room. Check the description for the links to the author.